Welcome everyone, and thanks for choosing to participate in my Kali Linux Hands-On Penetration Testing Labs 4.0 course. If you've taken my previous courses with similar names, you already know what's in store. I'm going to be providing a bunch of vulnerable virtual machines which will be hacking with Kali Linux using VirtualBox. At the time of this recording, all of this technology is cutting edge and real-world relevant. Just to give you an idea of what to expect, we'll be focusing very little on theory and putting a high emphasis on practical hands-on application of offensive security skills. For example, we're going to be utilizing some of the industry-standard penetration testing tools such as Nmap, Metasploit, Derby, Netcat, Burp Suite, and a bunch of custom exploits. We're going to be focusing on automated and manual enumeration and exploitation, which is a key essential when training to be a subject matter expert in our field. Some of the attack techniques that we're going to be covering are remote web application and service exploitation, privilege escalation, directory traversal, SQL injection, local file inclusion, and much more. If you're not quite sure what some or any of those words mean, don't worry. You'll see soon enough their effectiveness in action. Each lecture has a set of resources which are included as a text file. In order to access it, all you have to do is simply click on the resources dropdown for the particular lecture and download the text files you see on screen. This includes all of the commands which are utilized in that specific lecture, as well as URLs which I deem useful to the subject matter. With that being said, I really hope that you enjoy my course, and I encourage you to reach out to me via the Udemy messaging system, either in the Q&A section or direct message if you have any specific technical questions, or if you simply want career advice. If you enjoy my course, I'd really appreciate a positive review, as this directly impacts my ability to reach a wider audience of aspiring and current cybersecurity professionals. Have fun and good luck! Due to the recent changes in Kali Linux 2020, I'll be providing a custom-built VM for all of my courses, although this VM was built specifically for my newest course, Hands-On Penetration Testing Labs 4.0. This can be downloaded from the Google Drive that's attached to this lecture as a text file, as you see on screen. Kali Linux 2020 has one primary difference from all of its predecessors, being that it does not come configured with the root user. Instead, they've implemented an unprivileged user named Kali, which requires the usage of sudo to elevate privileges for many commands. You can use the unprivileged Kali account if you want to, but I've configured a Kali Linux 2020 VM which is tailored for this course that has a root user created the same way as the previous version of Kali. Additionally, I've installed most of the tools that will be required for enumeration and exploitation during the course of the upcoming lectures for your convenience. In order to get it, open up a web browser as you see on screen, access my provided Google Drive, and download the Kali Linux OVA file. To do this, just click Download. Click Download anyway. After the download is complete, double-click the OVA file, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Okay, here's the OVA file. I'm just going to double-click that. It is going to open up VirtualBox Manager. Once that's open, just name this Kali Linux 2020, and I'm going to click Import. Just give that a bit. Once the import is complete, let's check our network settings. So right-click Kali Linux 2020, go to Settings, click the Network tab, and for adapter 1, we want it attached to NAT. We could alternatively have it attached to the bridged adapter. Either one is going to give us internet connectivity. For adapter 2, we want it set to host only, and make sure that you have a name selected. If you don't have one, then you'll have to create one. So the host only adapter is the one that is going to allow us to communicate with all of the vulnerable VMs which we'll be attacking during this course. To start it up, just highlight this and click Start. The two accounts I have for you here are username root and password Tor, or T-O-O-R, all lowercase, and username Kali and password Kali, KALI, also all lowercase. So there you go, you're all set up. Enjoy. For this course, I've created a couple Google Drives which contain all of the necessary vulnerable virtual machines which we will be enumerating and exploiting during all of the lectures going forward. The Google Drive links are attached to this lecture in a text file. If the Google Drive is down for whatever reason, you can alternatively download most but not all of these VMs from VulnHub. First of all, you need to go to a web browser, access the Google Drive, and download all of the vulnerable VMs. You can do this by clicking Download All. If you do not have enough space for all of these, you can download them one by one and delete them as necessary. So I'm just going to show you how to download, unzip, and import this Torment VM. So I'm just going to click here, download anyway. Just wait for that to download, and I will show you how to import it. So here's the file I downloaded. So it's compressed. We have to uncompress that. So I'm just going to right-click that. I have 7-zip installed. If you don't have it, you can go ahead and download that. It's pretty easy. Then you go to extract here. Let's wait for that to complete. That's going to create a little directory here. So open that. And what we want to do is double-click the OVF file. It's going to open up VirtualBox Manager. Just going to name that Torment, and I'm going to click Import. Once that's done, we want to check the network settings. So right-click Torment, click Settings. I'm going to go to the Network tab. Same thing we did with Kali Linux. Now, I do not want this to be set to NAT. We don't want internet connectivity. We want host-only connectivity because we need to communicate with our Kali Linux machine. Once we verified that, we're good to go, and we can start attacking from Kali Linux. The first system that we're going to work on is Troll3. You may recognize this if you took my first course in the Hands-on Penetration Testing Lab series, in which I covered Troll1 and Troll2. Since I had a lot of fun with those, I wanted to go ahead and include this one in my new course. Go ahead and double-click the troll3.ova file. You can get this from my Google Drive. If you don't have it yet, please go back to the previous lecture which covers downloading the vulnerable virtual machines that we'll be using for the remainder of this course. So double-click the OVA file. That's going to launch your VirtualBox Manager. If you do not have VirtualBox, please go ahead and download the most recent version off of virtualbox.org. So now we're going to click Import. Once the import is done, make sure that you have your settings correct for Troll3. So right-click Troll3, click on Settings. Now go to the Network tab. All right, it is currently set to bridged adapter. We want to set it to host-only adapter. This is going to allow us to use an internal local area network to communicate to and from the Kali Linux VM. So that's all we need. We do not need internet connectivity with this vulnerable VM. So click OK. With Troll3 highlighted, click Start. Now, if you do not have your Kali Linux VM on yet, you want to go ahead and start that up as well. If Troll3 booted up properly, this is the prompt that you're going to see. It says, "Are you sure you want to do this? Log in, start, here." So this is a piece of information that could be potentially useful. Possibly a username and a password. It could be nothing. But let's just remember that and go over to Kali Linux. Go ahead and open up a terminal. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do in all of these challenges is to find the IP address of the target machine. Since we're in a local area network in the host-only interface, we're going to be able to use NetDiscover. So I'm just going to show you real quick. This is the host-only interface for my Kali Linux VM. If you are using the Kali Linux VM that I provided in the course, you will see something similar to this. Otherwise, you can use your own Kali VM, but if you have any issues connecting, you can go ahead and just use the one I have set up for you. So we have ETH1, which has the IP address of 192.168.56.149. And we are going to use that to connect to the Troll3 VM. So let's just clear that out. Type in netdiscover -i ETH1. That's going to be using that interface, which is the host-only interface, and we're going to search for the IP address using ARP, or Address Resolution Protocol. As you can see here, the IP address was discovered. If you're wondering what .1 and .100 are, the .1 is the IP address assigned to the host system, and the .100 is the IP address of the virtual DHCP server. These IP addresses are always going to be here in VirtualBox regardless of what systems are connected to the local area network, so just ignore them going forward. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy that IP address here. Now let's use an Nmap scan in order to see which ports are open. We're going to be using an Nmap scan with the -A switch, which is going to enable OS detection, version detection, script scanning, and traceroute. So I'm going to type Nmap -A and the IP address, which I just copied from the netdiscover results. So just press enter and wait for a little bit for that to finish. As you can see, there's only one port open, which is the common port for Secure Shell, or SSH, port 22. This is not usually an easy protocol to exploit. Let's enumerate this service further with another Nmap command. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that out, and we're going to type in Nmap-p, specify port 22, -s V, that is going to initiate a service scan. And we're going to use a script scan with the directives default safe. That is going to use all of the Nmap NSE scripts related to that specific port, which is 22, without using any exploits that could potentially result in a denial of service or other negative unforeseen consequences. So we're going to go ahead and type in the IP address and press enter. Okay, so we've enumerated the version 7.6p1 of OpenSSH. This is not directly exploitable based on any publicly known exploits. So the next step is to try to manually connect to the service. So if you remember, we found something in the banner. Let's just close this real quick and take a look at the banner. So take a look at that. It says, are you sure you want to do this? Log in, start, here. So I had this theory that maybe start was a username and here's a password. So let's just try that. Clear this out real quick. And I'm just going to SSH using the username start and type in that IP address. So SSH start at IP address. Type in yes. And we are going to use the password here. All right, so now we are in. Let's check out what we can find. I'm just going to go ahead and clear that out and ls the directory. We have two directories here, blue pill and red pill. So I'm going to go to blue pill first. We have a file here called awesome work. I'm just going to see what type of file that is. Text file, so I'm going to cat that. All right, we have a URL here. And reluctant to just go straight to it. So I'm going to make sure that it's safe before we go to it. Just going to copy that. Go to a web browser, and I'm going to unshorten this link. Because what this is, it's a shortened link. So you have no idea where it's going to lead to. I'm just going to go to unshorten.me. I'm going to plug that right in there and unshorten that link. Okay, looks like the URL is going to be an image or a query in this this website. How do you make a hacker waste time? All right, so that's a safe link to go to. I'm just going to go to it for fun. Yeah. So it's just showing us how to Google how to make a hacker waste time. That's very good. All right, so let's assume that this is a dead end and keep moving on. Just going to clear that out. We're going to go back one directory and go to the red pill directory. We have another text file named "This Will Surely Work." So I'm going to just, all right, we catted that. Step 2 and a password. So maybe that is another account that we can SSH to. Let's try that. Okay, so I'm just going to type Control-Shift-T to create a new tab. I'll make that a little bit bigger, and we're going to try to SSH into that username. It was step 2 and the IP address of Troll3. And I have the password on my clipboard. It was password1 exclamation point right here. And it did not work. So they have trolled us 2 times so far. Let's just go back to our working SSH session. Now we're going to utilize a find command that is going to start in the / or root directory, searching for type F, which stands for files, with permissions of 0777, which is read, write, and execute. It's essentially looking for files that we can access. The dev null here is to suppress errors for a nice clean output. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what we get. All right, as you can see here, we have a .cap file and a .text file. These files could be interesting. We have network traffic in the .cap file and some text in the goldstar.txt file. So let's copy them over to Kali so we can analyze them. For this task, we'll be using Secure Copy or SCP. So I'm just going to create another tab here, and I'm going to type in SCP start at IP address of Troll3 : and I'm going to copy over this file path here. Space dot, that's just going to drop it right in my root home directory. So the password is here. Okay, first one's done. Now let's just do the same exact thing. Start at IP address of Troll3. Then let's copy this giant file path here. Same thing, drop it right here in the home directory. Enter the password again. Very good. So now we have both of the files here in root's home directory. See them right here, goldstar.txt and whiteshadow.cap. Okay, so let's take a look at the text file first. So type in v goldstar.txt. All right, so looks like we have a bunch of strings here. Down here at the bottom, you'll see the amount of lines in the file. So there are over 3 million. That's a password list, possibly of over 3 million passwords here. Let's go ahead and exit out of that. Let's take a look at the packet capture now. So you can use Wireshark if you want, if you're more comfortable with that, but I like using TCP dump. It's a protocol analyzer that is used over the command line. It's useful in situations where you do not have access to the GUI or graphical user interface. Let's say you have hacked a machine, you have SSH access or a reverse shell of some sort, and you can't use Wireshark, obviously, because you don't have a GUI, but you can use TCP dump to sniff their traffic, for example. So anyway, we're going to type in TCP dump -NN What this does is the NN basically makes it to where the port numbers don't resolve to the names. The TTTT is just changing the time format to a human readable. The capital A is to print ASCII format, and the R is to read the following file. So the file's name was whiteshadow.cap, and I'm going to go ahead and pipe that to less. That's just going to put it in the results from the TCP dump command is going to be piped into less so we can read it easier. Okay, so if you've never seen wireless network traffic before, these are a bunch of deauthentication packets here. All right, so let's go down. Just went all the way down to the end. So what you see here are a bunch of acknowledgements and data IV. So what IV stands for is initialization vector, which is a common number that's used with a secret key for wireless authentication. So what's happening in this PCAP is known as the 802.11 association process, which is required to be carried out before a device can connect to a wireless network. So what we have here is this .cap file with wireless traffic in it and a potential password list. Let's see if we can leverage the Wi-Fi attack tool aircrackng to recover any passwords from the captured network traffic. So I'm just going to exit out of this. Now we're going to type aircrack-ng-w. We're going to be specifying the word list, which is the goldstar.txt file. And we are going to specify the packet capture file, which is whiteshadow.cap. Press enter. Let that run. So it's going to take 5 minutes to complete running through this word list. Very good. So after a couple of minutes, we found a key. So logic would tell me, based on the artifacts that we observed in the PCAP and the name of the file, that white shadow would be the username, and this key could be the password for SSH. So let's go ahead and put that theory to the test. I'm going to just create another tab here, and we're going to try to SSH white shadow at IP address of troll3. And I'm just going to go back here and copy this password. Try that out. Okay, very good. Now we're in with a new user, White Shadow. Just going to clear that out. And let's see what we can find in here. All right, so I just ls the home directory. We have this executable called oofun. Let's just run that and see what happens. All right, looks like it's going to scroll. I'm crazy like a lynx. I'm just going to do Control-C to end that. Just clear that. Okay. Let's just quickly run a sudo -l to see if we have any sudo permissions. Supply that password here. Okay, so we have the ability to run nginx start as sudo, as root. All right, so now that we know that we can run nginx start as root, let's try to abuse that to gain privilege escalation to root. So we're going to go to etc nginx, and I'm going to take a look at the sites enabled directory, see if there's, I'm going to check out the default file here. See, this is a configuration file. So the default server configuration. All right, so I see that it is listening on port 8080, and I see this user agent links. So if you recall earlier, when we ran that binary, it said crazy like a lynx over and over. That could be a clue, cluing us in on what we may have to do here. We maybe have to utilize this links service over port 8080 in some way. So let's check that out. Okay, so let's see if the service is actually running. I'm going to type in netstat-antp. Okay, so we do not have a process running over port 8080, but we were told earlier to run a command, sudo service nginx start. Okay, let's just run that again. All right, so now we are listening on port 8080, as you can see right here. All right, so let's just move over to another tab here. And I'm going to see if I can connect to it over links. All right, so simply type links, http:// and the IP address of troll3 colon 8080 for the port number. Press enter. All right, so we've connected and it looks like we have a username and password. So we're going to just copy that, see if we can SSH into that. All right, so SSH, we got the username genflux at IP address of troll3. I'm just going to copy over that password. All right, we found another legitimate account. So let's just clear that out. Take a look at what we have in here. Okay. So we have a private key. Let's take a look at that, Malleus. All right, that looks like an SSH key. Maybe we can use that to further escalate privileges. And I see a file named xlogin as well. So let's focus on this SSH key. I'm just going to copy that. Easier than copying it over. Just copy the text, and I'm going to create a file, SSH key. Just paste that text in there, save it. Okay, so let's modify the permissions. Just chmod 600 SSH key. And now we're going to try to SSH into the user Malleus with this SSH key. So to do that, we'll type SSH Malleus at IP address of troll3 -I SSH key. So we're going to be utilizing this private key with the username of Malleus to try to log into troll3. All right, so we have found yet another user. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We have a file called Don't Even Bother. It's an executable. So let's try. All right, it says enter the password. We do not know what the password is. Try Malleus. All right, so we're going to have to figure out what the password is somehow. So let's analyze the metadata in this file a bit using the strings command. So strings don't even bother. All right. Just going to go up a little bit. So I see here, enter the password, and then it has this string right under enter the password. That could be the password right there. So looks like it. Let me try that out. So let's just execute don't even bother, enter that password, and it says correct password. Your reward is just knowing you did it. So let's save this password. It might be useful for something else later down the road. Okay, so let's take another look here in the directory. We have this file vim info. Let's check that out. Okay. So I see here under registers another potential password. Just going to copy that real quick. So we have two passwords now, one that we found in the binary and one we found in the vim info file. So let's just clear that out real quick. Now let's see if we have any sudo privileges. So just sudo -l. All right, so we have two passwords that we found earlier. It's prompting us for a password here. First one I'm going to try is the one we found in the binary. All right, incorrect password. I'm going to try the other one that we found in Vim info. Very good. Okay, so the correct password is the one that starts with capital B that we found in Vim info. All right, so let's see what we can do. It says we can run the following commands in Control3, home, malleus, don't even bother. So don't even bother was that binary that we just found. So what we can do here is completely remove the binary, make a new one, and use it to spawn a root shell. Since we can do it with sudo, we can run it as root. Therefore, we can escalate our privileges. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right, so first I'm going to remove this file. Now I'm going to create a new file, the same name, but .c, because we're going to have to create some source code and then compile it to create the executable. So, okay, we got some weird Vim error. Just press enter to continue, it says, so we'll do that. And now I'm going to paste a simple piece of code. What this is going to do is set the group identifier, as you see here, the GID, to 0, and the user identifier, or UID, to 0 as well. 0 stands for root in Linux, and it is going to create a shell. So we have /bin/sh. So let's go ahead and save that. We got this little error here. Just press enter. Don't worry about it. And now we're going to compile our code. So gcc don't even bother.c -o for output. And we're going to name it exactly the same thing. So we can use sudo on this command. Okay, don't worry about those errors. It's to be expected. And now let's use the command sudo don't even bother, just like we saw up top. Okay. Very good. As you can see here, we are now logged in as root. And we have access to the flag. Here you go. Now we have successfully completed this challenge. Let's move on to the next one. Matrix 3 is an intentionally vulnerable Linux VM from VulnHub. As with all the others, the objective is to obtain unauthorized root access somehow and capture a flag file that requires root privileges to read. Let's get to work. So first of all, just double-click the OVA file that's supplied with this course. If you don't have it yet, you can get it from my Google Drive. Click Import. Now let's just verify that it has the correct settings. So right-click Machine Matrix, click Settings. We're going to go to Network. Okay, good. This one is set as host only. Make sure that yours is set to your host only adapter. Now we're just going to double-click that to start it. Okay, once it's booted up, switch over to your Kali Linux box. If you don't have it on yet, go ahead and turn it on now. So I'm just going to swap over to Kali Linux, open up a terminal, and I'm going to use NetDiscover to find the IP address of the Matrix 3 box, scanning the host-only network. Okay, so we've got the IP address. Let's try an nmap scan. This is going to be a little bit different than the other one. So nmap -p-, that's going to scan all 65,535 ports instead of the default top most common ports. So you do that, -a, and we're going to do -t5. That's the timing template. It's the fastest one, so just a speedy scan. And we're going to put in the IP address and get to work. All right, so we have port 80 open, which is running simple HTTP server. SSH running on a non-standard port 6464. And port 7331, which is running something called CalDAV. All right, so what I want to check out first is port 80. So let's open up a web browser and see what we get out of that. So I'm just going to minimize this for a second, open up a web browser. Now I'll just access it over HTTP. So the IP address of matrix 3 right there. And we have this web page. It says follow the white rabbit. And I'm just going to right click any space in here and view page source. All right. See if we can find anything in the metadata here. Doesn't look like there's anything of value. So we're going to close out of that. And we're going to try to brute force some web directories if possible. So let's just minimize that real quick. Go back to the terminal. Just going to clear that out. Okay, so now we're going to use dir, which is a tool that will attempt to request web directories in a list that we supply and shows which directories have legitimate responses from the web server, ergo revealing what's accessible, if anything. So let's run it against matrix 3 over port 80 with the default word list and see what we can find. Just dir http :// and the IP address of matrix 3. Okay, so I see a directory here, assets. Let's just right click that and open link, see what's in it. All right, so seeing some basic default stuff here. I do see matrix can show you the door.png. So it's an image file. Let's just click that. All right, we have a rabbit here. I'm just going to save that image. Save it to the downloads folder. So the reason I'm saving this is because I want to check the image out to see if there's any metadata, steganography, stuff that I can analyze in it to maybe get a password or some other useful information, because this is a capture the flag virtual machine. Sometimes that works out. So let's go back to the terminal and I'll show you how to use zsteg. Okay, zsteg is a useful tool that we can use to figure out if there's any embedded data in the .png file. So first of all, I'm going to go to the downloads folder where we have the PNG file that we just downloaded. And by the way, the zsteg tool is not included by default in Kali. I have it on this VM that I supplied for you in this course, but if you're using your own, you may have to download it. Just type in gem install zsteg. So anyway, we're going to type in zsteg-a, and the name of the file here is matrix can show you the door.png, and hit enter. It's going to run some quick analysis. Okay, let's take a look at what we have here under the results. Looks like a bunch of gibberish. All right. I don't see anything of interest here. I'm going to just clear that out. And let's try strings. It is a built-in Linux command that we can use to see any plain text strings that are inside this file here. Looks like the same thing here. Scroll to the top. There's nothing that I see so far that's useful, potentially. Just going to run that again, pipe it to less. Yeah, everything looks normal here. I don't see anything of interest. Okay. So analysis of this picture has yielded no results. But let's just go back to the web browser here. I'm going to close these tabs real quick. And let's try to see if the string matrix is actually a web directory. Okay. Let's try uppercase. Okay, good. Now we're in. We have some sort of web directory here named matrix. All right, so now let's see what we can find in this newly discovered web directory. So let's just click on the first one here. Okay, so clicking on the first link brought us to this other directory 4, which has the directories EMNOR. Just go back one real quick. Let's see. Okay, so same thing. Okay. So it looks like some of these lead to dead ends. So with knowledge of capture the flag challenges, it's probably trying to spell out some sort of word or use some sort of combination that'll allow us to unlock some resource to move to the next step. So we could try every combination, but that'd take a long time. So I'm just gonna check it out offline real quick. Okay, so the star of the movie Matrix is Neo. That's his hacker name. So let's just spell that out. So N-E-O. It spells out Neo up here. And what that does is brings us to another set of directories, 1 through 9. And I have no idea what this number could possibly be, even with knowledge of the movie. So I'm going to brute force it with Burp Suite Intruder. To do that, let's just set up our proxy. So preferences here. Type in proxy in the search bar here. Click settings. Click the manual proxy configuration. And we're going to type in 127.0.0.1. That's the loopback address. And we're going to specify a port of 8080. That's the default port for Burp Suite. Make sure to check this box here. Use proxy server for all protocols. Now we can click OK. All right, now hop over to Burp Suite. I have it here on your desktop. Just click close and start a temporary project using Burp's defaults. Okay, real quick. So if you've never heard of Burp Suite before, it is the best web application hacking tool, hands down, especially for manual penetration testing of web applications. I highly suggest that you familiarize yourself with it and maybe even buy the pro version, which is a steal at like $499. It's very cheap for what it is. It's something that I couldn't live without as a professional pen tester. Anyway, we're going to go to the proxy tab. And now we're going to click options. All right, so as you can see here, it is running the proxy right now over port 8080, same way as we set it up in Firefox. So just going to go to the intercept tab. And we have everything set up to proxy traffic. So all I have to do is go over here, back to this directory, the matrix NEO. And I'm just going to click reload current page. That's going to intercept that request into this proxy. So now that I have the request, I'm just going to right click and send to intruder. Now let's just click the intruder tab. Okay, first thing is to go to the positions tab. This is going to be where the payloads are going to be inserted. So we have payload 1 and 2. The forward slashes indicate the levels of the web directory. So we started out in this directory NEO, and we're going to try to brute force additional directories, see if we can get to the next step by using these two payload positions. And we're going to iterate through numbers 1 through 9, because as you see here, we have 1 through 9. So we're just going to try all combinations of those. instead of clicking on them one by one, which could take forever. So let's do that. And instead of attack type sniper, we're going to choose cluster bomb. I'm going to tell you why we do that right now. So we can just get a quick explanation here. All I did was click this question mark. We have Burp Suite documentation. So we have everything to do with the intruder here. I'm just going to go to positions and attack type. So cluster bomb uses multiple payload sets. So instead of a sniper that is going to use a single set of payloads, we are going to use 2 payloads, or 2 or more. So a maximum of 20. All right, so we're going to close that out. Go to the payloads tab. Okay, so for payload set 1, we're going to set a payload type of numbers. Just going to be real simple, 1 through 9. And step is going to be 1, so 1 at a time. And sequential, just run it down the line, 1 through 9. Same thing for payload set 2. Numbers, 1 through 9, step 1. And now we're going to go to options. Since we know that it is going to result in a 301 redirect, we want to follow the redirection so we can analyze the end result instead of just 301, which is going to be the same for everything. So just click always. And now we can start the attack. So click that button right here and click OK. Okay, so once that's done, we're going to sort it by length. That's going to sort it by the content length of the response from the web server. So as you can see here, we have one request, which is the 33rd request, that has a different content length than every other response from the web server. So this could be our way in. We have Neo64. Okay, so we can just quickly request in browser an original session, or we could just type it in, but I'm just showing you a different way to do it. So just click copy. And before you try to access that, we have to turn off the proxy. Otherwise, it's going to be intercepted and indefinitely stall you from getting to it. So click that. Intercept is off. Just going to go to this tab here and paste. All right. So that brings us to a file named secret.gz. So let's go ahead and click on that file and save it. Let's open up a terminal real quick. Let's go to the downloads directory. There's a file here. Let's see what type of file it is real quick. Just run the file command on it. Okay. So it is a text file with a .gz extension. So let's just take a look at what is in that file. Okay. So we have admin and what looks like to be a MD5 hash. It's probably a password. Okay, so what we want to do now is crack this hash. So let's just highlight it and copy it. Now what I'm going to do here is echo double quote, paste the string in there and double quote, and put it in a file named hash. And we're going to use John the Ripper to crack the hash. So John -- show. It's going to show the password after it's cracked. -- format equals raw -MD5, specifying the MD5 is the hash type and the name of the file, which is hash. Okay, password cracked. We immediately got it. It is a password of lowercase PASSWD. So if you remember from the Nmap output, SSH was open over port 6464. Let's just go back to the home directory and clear the terminal real quick. I'm going to type in SSH admin at IP address of matrix 3, and I'm going to specify a port number of 6464. Just type in yes. Okay, so the password was PASSWD. All right, so it's not an SSH username and password, unfortunately, so we're going to have to try to attack the other services. We also had port 7331 open. So I'm just going to go over here to our web browser and type in http://192.168.56.135. That's the IP address of matrix 3. And I'm going to try a port of 7331. Okay, so it's requesting a username and password. Let's try the username and password we just recovered, admin PASSWD. All right, so we are in. Looks like, let's take a look here. So looks like another dead end similar to the one on port 80. Let's see if we can brute force any web directories here. Since we have the username and password, we can do an authenticated dir scan. So let's just go back here and try that out. Let's just try dir http:// IP address of matrix 3. This time specifying a port of 7331 -u. We're going to use admin and password, or PASSWD. Try that. Okay, we have a couple directories here. I see a new one called data. Let's just open that link real quick. We're already logged in. All right, let me see. There's a file here named data. Let's save that. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so this is a packed executable. Let's just open our file system here. We'll do it right here on the desktop. And I'll go to my downloads folder. Okay. If you highlight this file, it says here that it's a DOS or Windows executable. So we can reverse engineer this file using a tool called Ghidra, which was developed by the NSA for these purposes. So I'm going to go to my home folder. Now, I've already installed Ghidra for you on the Kali Linux VM that I supplied with this course. But if you are using your own, you'll just have to install Ghidra and download JDK and unpack that, and you'll be fine. Otherwise, just use mine because it's easier. It has everything you need. So I have Ghidra here. Just going to show you how to do that. So unzip Ghidra. Okay, so let's change to the newly created directory. All right, there it is, the executable. So all we have to do now is type ./Ghidra run. It's going to open Ghidra for us. If there are any prompts, just click OK or to get to the next step. And what we have here is the ability to import a file. So just file, import file. And we're going to go to our downloads folder where the data file is, the DOS executable. Click OK. All right. So we have a quick import results summary here. All right, that's interesting. We have a full file path here. All right, click OK. All right, so right click this imported file data and open in default tool. So click yes to analyze the data. Use the default options. Click analyze. Okay, so we got some sort of warnings. Just click OK, ignore that. I'm going to maximize this. And it looks like we have quite a bit of data to look through here. So really there's no easy way to do this. You have to look line by line, see if there's anything interesting here. Okay, after a ton of looking through mostly useless information, I found a username and password. Here it is, guest, and this password right here. Took me about 10 times looking through the entire thing of output here, but I found it. So let's just copy that and move on, try to see if we can get into SSH with this username and password that we found. All right, back to a terminal, and we're going to type SSH guest at IP address of matrix 3, and we're going to use port 6464. And we're going to try that password that we just recovered using Ghidra. All right, very good. Now we're logged in as guest. So let's see what we can find in the directory. All right, looks like we are in a limited shell. Let's just use echo shell to show the shell variable here. All right, it's running rbash. So luckily there's ways around this. Otherwise, we will not be able to use any basic Linux commands. So there's a way to bypass these restrictions within SSH itself. So what I'm going to do is just exit out of this SSH session, and we're going to type in SSH guest at IP address of matrix 3, port 6464-T, double quote bash hyphen no profile. What that is going to do, it's going to open an SSH session with no profile for bash. So it should bypass this rbash and allow us to type regular commands. So plug in your password. Very good. Now we can type commands. All right, so let's see if there's anything that we can use as sudo. All right, so we have two things that we can run. One is root and one is the user Trinity. Not quite sure how we would use this, but I do see the cp command, which is copy. There's a couple ways I can think of right off the bat to be able to abuse that to escalate privileges from guest to user. So let's try that first. What we can do here is generate an SSH key pair, copying the public key into the authorized keys folder of matrix 3 and use the private key to SSH in as the user Trinity. So let's give that one a shot. Okay, first of all, we're going to generate a key pair. So SSH-keygen. I'm doing this in my home directory. So I'm going to name the file Trinity and just hit enter for all the other prompts. All right, so here I have Trinity and trinity.pub in my home directory. I'm just going to show you right here. It's in home guest. Okay, so now I'm going to change the permissions of trinity.pub. So chmod 777 trinity.pub. Okay. Now we're going to use our sudo capabilities to copy the file into the home trinity.ssh directory. So let's do that. I'm going to type in sudo-u, specify the user Trinity. I'm going to use cp, and we're going to use trinity.pub, copy it into home trinity.ssh, authorized _keys. Okay, now let's just cat this private key, and I'm just going to grab that, and we're going to open up another tab here in Kali again. So I'll just create a new file named Trinity. All right, we have our private key right there. Save that. And now we should be able to SSH as the user Trinity with this private key. Okay, before we use it though, we're going to have to change the permissions. So chmod 600 Trinity. And now let's type in SSH Trinity at IP address of matrix 3, port number 6464, -I, specifying that private key that we just made. All right, here we are. We're in Trinity at matrix. We have escalated privileges to user. Let's see if there's any sudo commands that we can run as Trinity. So sudo -l. All right, so there's one command that we can run as root. It is in our home directory named Oracle. So let's see what that's about. Well, we're in our home directory here, and there is no file named Oracle. So we're going to have to create one. This is an easy way to escalate our privileges. We can make a simple shell script. So I'm just going to name it Oracle, so it matches what we can use with sudo. And I'm just going to write a simple shell script. /bin/bash. Could be /bin/sh as well. Either one of those is going to spawn a root shell if we use it with sudo. So let's try that out. I'm going to change the permissions, so make it executable. So chmod 777 Oracle. Now sudo, we're in the correct directory already, so sudo Oracle. Okay, here we go. We got root privileges now, so let's go to the root directory. There we go. All right, we have successfully escalated privileges to root. We're now complete, and we can move on to the next one. This next intentionally vulnerable VM is called Broken Gallery. We'll be trying to obtain root access to this Linux machine. So first step is to import the OVF file by double-clicking it. And we're going to name that Broken Gallery. Just click import. Once the VM is imported, right-click Broken Gallery. We're going to check the settings real quick. So click Settings, go to the Network tab, and it should be attached to the host-only adapter. So this is good. Now we're going to start the VM and go over to Kali Linux once it's booted up. As with all the others, open up a terminal. We'll be using netdiscover. So netdiscover -i eth1, find that IP address of Broken Gallery. Okay, once the scan has discovered your IP address, let's move on to an nmap scan. So Control-C to kill that. We're just running a basic nmap scan like before. Okay, so it looks like we have port 22, which is running SSH, and port 80, which is running Apache web server. I also see that nmap has automatically enumerated a couple of files here in the web root. So I'm going to check out port 80 first. Let's just minimize this and open up a web browser. We'll access that IP address, http:// and the IP address of Broken Gallery. Looks like I have a proxy server running. So for those who had Burp Suite open before, if you do not turn off your proxy, then you will not be able to get in. So let's just turn that off real quick. All right. So there are all the files that were listed in Nmap. So now what I want to do is download all these .jpg files and analyze them to see if there's any interesting data embedded within them, because this is something that I've encountered a lot in the past with capture the flag challenges. So just click on these and just save them into my downloads folder and go back. So I'll just open up new tabs. And I'm just saving all these into my downloads folder. All right, just minimize that. Go back to your terminal here. Just going to clear out that. Don't need it anymore. And we'll go to the downloads directory. First thing I want to do is to use the strings command. I'm going to use it on all the files in this directory that have a .jpg extension. Pipe that to less just so I can have a nice way to visualize it. All right, and so now we have to just manually look through all these lines to see if there's anything interesting here. So far, nothing but garbage. Okay, I've reached the end of the less output here, and I do not see anything interesting. So let's try a different method. We're going to try to use steghide, which is a steganography tool that's able to hide and retrieve hidden data in these .jpg files if it exists. So type steghide, extract, -sf, and the name of one of these image files. So let's see, we have the 5terry.jpg. It's asking us for a passphrase. I'm just going to try the name of the file as a passphrase, see if that works. Okay, so either we have an incorrect passphrase or it just does not have any embedded data. So I'm going to go ahead and run steghide on all of these files with multiple permutations of these file names and see if we can get anything out of that. Okay, so I'm not having any luck here with steghide, so I'm just going to quit for now, and I'm going to switch my attention to SSH. So we have the names of all these files. Maybe if I make a word list with all of these file names, then I can use that word list to brute force attack SSH. So let's try that real quick. So you want to use bash to automate everything you can whenever possible. So instead of manually clicking on each one, I'm just going to list the contents of the directory with ls, pipe that to grep everything with a .jpg extension, and I'm going to pipe that to sed. So I'm going to remove that .jpg extension so I have a nice word list. So sed s / put in a literal dot. That's what that backslash is before the dot. JPG //. That's going to replace .jpeg with nothing. There you go. Now we have a little word list we can use. I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to make a new file. Actually, you know what? Instead of doing all that, we could just redirect it to a file called word list. There you go. Now we're going to try a brute force attack against SSH. So using Hydra, we can accomplish this task. Hydra-L, we're going to use this word list we just created. So word list and -p, we're also going to use the same word list for the password. So we're going to use all these strings here as the username and password and iterate through each one of them for all combinations. And we'll do IP address of Broken Gallery and specify the protocol as SSH. Okay, 0 valid passwords found. That is unsuccessful. Let's try to improve this word list by using RS Mangler, which is going to create a bunch of permutations of these words. I'll show you how to do that now. First of all, I want to remove the img underscore from each word. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. See that img underscore? I want to strip that off and just be left with these words here. So just quickly pipe that to sed. I'm going to remove img underscore. I'm going to put that in a new file called wordlist2. So I'm just going to open wordlist2. And I'm going to add a couple words at the top here. I'm just going to add broken and gallery. And we're going to use this word list with RS Mangler. All right, so let's go over this RS Mangler command. It's a pretty large command here. All these switches here mean that these parameters are turned off. So all of those are on by default. Now we have the M switch, which is the minimum word length, and the X switch, which is the maximum word length. So minimum of 6, maximum of 8. And you can check out what each one of these switches does. I just turned off a lot of them because it would make a huge word list, and we cannot have an exorbitant length of words because it'll take forever for the brute force attack. So we have a F switch, which is the wordlist2 file that we just created, and we're going to output it to a file named mangled. So hit enter. Just wait for that to complete. Okay, so once that's done, you're going to be left with a file named mangled. So let's just cat mangled and pipe that to wc-l. That's going to see how many lines are in the file. So we have 480 words in this word list. That's not too bad. We don't want to have a giant word list. It's going to take forever with Hydra. So now let's move on to Hydra. We're going to use a word list of wordlist2 for the usernames because we don't want to use the mangled word list for the usernames and the passwords. That's going to take forever as well. So we'll use the mangled file for the password word list, and we're going to specify the IP address of broken gallery and the protocol, which is SSH. Okay, so in no time at all, we've been able to brute force the password. It has a password of broken and a username of broken. So we actually didn't need to generate this mangled word list at all, but it was good that I was able to show you how to do it in case it wasn't this easy. Really, we could have just guessed broken and gotten right in. So let's go ahead and switch over to a SSH and see if that'll work. SSH broken at IP address of broken gallery. Password is broken. Okay, we're in. So now that we're in, let's check the sudo privileges. Sudo -l. All right. So it looks like we are able to run the commands time date CTL and reboot. So time date CTL allows us to change the system clock settings, and reboot obviously reboots the system. So let's see if there's a way that we can possibly exploit this pseudo privilege that we have. A good thing I like to do post-exploitation when enumerating a system is to check the command history. So just go ahead and type in history. Okay. So I see, yeah, they're running this command here. And then I see password policy.sh. That's something that may be interesting. All right, so let's find out where password-policy.sh is at. Okay, it's not here in our home directory. I see it. It's in etc init.d. Actually, okay. This .sudo as admin successful. I wonder what that is. Nothing. All right, so we want to find this file here. I'm going to try to locate it. Oops. Okay. So we're able to cat the file. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so this is a simple shell script that is going to check the day of the week. And if it's the 4th day of the week, starting from Sunday, it looks like it's going to run a password change, changing the root password to today is a good day. So let's take a look at this right here. Okay. So it's already at 4 right now, supposedly, according to this date command that we just ran. So let's try to run this shell script. So it'll change the root password to today is a good day. Oh, we have to put in the entire file path. All right, so just copy that in there. Password for broken. Okay, so we're not able to execute the shell script's function to change the password. We're going to have to find a way around this. Luckily, this password policy.sh file is in a directory etc init.d, which is among a bunch of scripts that are going to execute upon system startup. We also have the ability to reboot the system with sudo. Therefore, we should be able to get the shell script to execute, as it is now day 4 according to the system clock. So what I'm going to do is sudo reboot and SSH back in as root with the password today is a good day. Hopefully that'll work. So that killed our SSH session because it's now rebooting. We're going to have to wait just a little while to see if we can SSH back in as root. All right, so SSH root at IP address of broken gallery. And we're going to try to paste in that password, today is a good day. Okay, permission denied. Perhaps we're not allowed to SSH in as root. So let's just SSH back in as broken and try to switch to the user root. Okay, so I'm just going to do su root and enter that password, today is a good day. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're now logged in as root. This challenge is over. There's no flag.txt file in this particular challenge, so let's move on. DumbUser Win10 is an intentionally vulnerable Windows 10 64-bit virtual machine which we will be exploiting. This operating system is a bit more difficult to exploit than the others because it's more modern and it has a lot of built-in security such as memory protection. A good bit of the security measures were disabled on this virtual machine to provide a proof of concept exploitation. Let's get started by importing. Double-click the OVA file. Click Import. Now let's just click Start, boot up our system. Once you're all booted up, we can go ahead and click DumbUser, and we're going to log in with the password of DumbUser. Same case as the username. And we're going to be prompted with a password expiration message, and we have to change our password, so change it to whatever you want. Press enter, and click OK once your password is changed. Our first objective here is to get a reverse shell to access the DumbUser account. Unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to directly exploit Windows 10 64-bit machines, so we'll be going with a scenario that requires social engineering and user intervention in order to gain our initial access. What we have here is a vulnerable version of FTP shell client installed. In order to exploit FTP shell client, the user needs to send a connection attempt to a malicious FTP server, which we will be setting up now. I'm going to be showing you how to exploit this with the existing Metasploit exploit module, which appears to be the most reliable, and also a standalone exploit, which is a collection of Python scripts. Switch over to your Kali Linux VM. If it's not on, then turn it on and pause the video until it's loaded. If you're already ready, then let's go over to our terminal and type in MSF console. We are now going to be setting up the Metasploit exploit module. Use Windows/FTP/FTP shell _CLI_BOF. Now set the L host to the IP address of your Kali Linux VM. In my case, it's the one you see on screen. And we are also going to set the SRV host to the same IP address. Otherwise, it'll default to something else that we don't want. Okay, now we're going to set the payload to Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP. Everything looks good. Type in run, hit enter. All right, make sure your IPs are correct. And now we have a FTP server ready to send a buffer overflow payload to whomever connects. Now let's go back to our Windows 10 machine. Double-click on the FTP shell client shortcut. As you can see here, it's already populated with some information. I've already been trying it a couple times. And tried to automatically connect. So what you want to do here is type in the IP address of your Kali Linux VM and click connect. Let's hop back over to Kali Linux and see what happened. All right, I got a Meterpreter session opened. So if this doesn't work and it crashes for whatever reason, keep trying over and over until it works. Sometimes it didn't work for me when I was figuring this exploit out, but it seems to be pretty reliable for what it is. You know, sometimes you're not going to get it. You just if it crashes and it does not work, you don't get your session, then just close out, double click the client again, put your information in here, your IP address here, and then click connect until it works. So that's the best you can do on this exploit. For me, it worked on the first time, luckily this time. So let's interact with our session. Good. Just type in get UID. Okay, as you can see here, we are logged in as DumbUser. What we want to do is escalate privileges to administrator. So let's see if we can automatically do that by typing in get system. No, we cannot. That's to be expected. So let's check for insecurely configured services and see if we can escalate privileges manually, which is what I want to show you anyway. So for that, we're going to upload a very useful executable called access CHK. And I already have that in our downloads directory in the Kali Linux VM that is included with my course. So let's just use the upload command in Meterpreter to upload that file. Okay, so I've typed that in wrong. Hold up one second. Let me just go over here. Okay, so it's just right here in the downloads folder. Sorry about that. So we're just going to remove that folder. Here's where it is. Okay. It says access is denied. I don't like that very much. Let's figure out why it's doing this. So I figured out the reason that it didn't work. Print the working directory. We see we have FTP shell client as the directory, and we do not have write access to it. So what we want to do is go back a couple directories here. All right, now we're in the C directory, and we want to go to users and DumbUser. We should have write access to our own user directory. I'm just going to background that and clear it. Okay, so now let's try our upload command again. There it is. Good. So we dropped it in our user directory, and we can now use that file. Okay, so just going to switch to a Windows shell and just type the word shell and hit enter. And we're going to run a command to see all services that we're able to modify. The goal here is to potentially swap out a legitimate service for a malicious one of our own creation. And I'll show you how to do that next if we find a proper service that we can utilize. Okay, so nothing found with that. We're going to try another command to see if there are any weak permissions configured in any file from the C directory on. All right, quite a bit. And they're all in the PC protect directory. So I have my eyes on this executable here, security service.exe. Let's take a closer look at it. So we're going to use the sc command against security service. We're going to see the specifics about this command. It looks like it is running as local system. That's very good because it'll elevate our privileges if we can somehow execute a malicious binary in its place. And as we know from the access check 64.exe command, this does have weak permissions, and we should be able to get that accomplished. Okay. We also know that it is auto start. So that means when we reboot the system, it's going to start up with the rest of this applications here in the PC Protect application. So let's just go ahead and run another command to further verify our findings here. iCackles. Yep, running as system. Very good. Now let's see if the service is running at this moment. So just task list /svc. All right, it's running all the currently running services. Let's go up, try to find our service.exe or security service.exe. And yes, here it is. Okay, so based on the information that we've culminated, at this point, we can assume that security service.exe is going to be started from this location when booting up Windows 10. My approach is going to generate some malware with MSF Venom, upload it, and replace security service.exe with my malicious file of the same name. At the same time, we're going to be running a Metasploit listener so we can get a reverse shell back with administrative privileges. So first step, we're going to go back to our Kali Linux local VM. All right, I'm in my home directory now, and I have this MSF Venom command. So I have a payload that is for Windows with a 64-bit architecture, and we have reverse TCP. We have a local host of the IP address of Kali Linux, local port of 4445. We're going to format that in exe, and we have the name of securityservice.exe. We want to replace that legitimate service with this malicious service. Let's just make sure real quick that we are not using port 4445. So all I have to do for that is background the service and show options. Okay. So we're using a port 4444 for this Metasploit exploit module. So we're good. We can use the port that we just utilized in our MSF Venom command. I'm just going to go back to our session. And back here, hit enter. We're going to generate our malicious executable. Done. Okay, with the upload command, we're going to upload securityservice.exe to the DumbUser directory. Very good. Now let's switch over to a Windows shell, and we're going to delete the legitimate securityservice.exe file. For that, I'm going to use the Windows command line. Okay, so that did not work. Must be because the process is still running. So let's try moving the file instead. I'm going to try to move the file from our directory to the legitimate service directory. Try to overwrite it. We want to overwrite? Yes. Access is denied. Okay. Still didn't work. This is not looking good. Let me try to instead rename the service. So I have a ren command. I have the file path of the legitimate service, and then I'm going to rename it to securityservice.zz.exe. Okay, so that did not give us an error. That's a good thing. Let me just take a look real quick in this directory, make sure that it is actually renamed. Oh, I tried to ls. I'm not in Meterpreter shell anymore. That is not going to work. So we're going to use the dir command. All right. There we go. As you can see here, it was successfully renamed. Now we can simply move the malicious file into this directory. I'm going to paste in this move command. As you can see here, I have the malicious binary or executable here, and I'm going to move it into the file path for PC protect and name it securityservice.exe. Good. Now let's set up a Metasploit listener for when the malicious executable is executed. It's not going to happen until we reboot the system. So I'm just going to make another tab, MSF console, and we are going to set up a multi-handler. So use multi/handler, set lhost of the IP address of Kali Linux, set L port of 4445, that's what we specified in the MSF Venom command, and set the payload to the same payload we specified in the MSF Venom command. So Windows 64-bit Meterpreter, reverse TCP. Let's run that. It's now actively listening for a connection. Now back to our Windows machine. We're going to type in shutdown/R to restart it. Go ahead and check to make sure. Yep, So that command is shutting it down. It takes a little bit, but it's going to work. Okay, as you can see here, we have our interpreter session. Yeah, we have system level privileges, but I've noticed that it dies pretty quickly, about 1 minute. So we only have 1 minute to do whatever we want to do. I'm going to try to figure out how to establish a persistent connection so we do not lose this. See, right there, I've tried about 6 times, and every time it dies at about 30 seconds or 1 minute. So we're going to have to figure out a solution to that. Okay, I've restarted it, being the Windows 10 machine, and I'm going to run this post exploitation module, which is going to migrate to another process. And hopefully that's going to maintain persistence with this interpreter shell. So as you can see here, we've spawned a notepad.exe and we've migrated to it successfully. So now we should be okay. This is very useful because it was dying every 30 seconds, 6 times in a row. It was not reliable. Now we have a reliable interpreter shell. So that portion of this lecture is complete. Now I'm going to show you a collection of Python scripts to accomplish the same goal of exploiting the FTP shell vulnerability. So I have a collection of Python scripts called Exploits and Security Tools Framework. I have it installed here on the Kali box that is included in this lecture or included in this course. And here it is, just change directory to east, and we're going to type in Python start.py. That'll allow us to access it over a web browser. So just loopback address. There we go. You should see this screen. And I'm going to type in FTP. That'll give us access to this exploit, which is what we want. Okay, we're going to use a listener reverse shell using port 4444 and callback IP, Kali Linux IP. Click run. All right, so now this is just the malicious FTP server waiting for a connection from our Windows box. So switch over to your Windows box and send a connection request to your Kali Linux box, same as we did before. So here we are on our Windows box. Just going to open up, type in the IP address of Kali Linux, and press enter. You see here we got the malicious payload. I'm just going to toss that over here. And what I see here is an interactive shell right here in the web browser. Just type in who am I. There we go. We're currently interacting with the DumbUser account, and that's pretty much how it goes. So we could do the same thing here, exactly what we just did. You know how to escalate privileges at this point. This is just to show you a different way of how to exploit that FTP shell remote command execution. Symfonos is another intentionally vulnerable Linux VM and is the first in the series of 5 that we'll be covering in this course. Let's get to work. First of all, we're going to import the OVF file. So double click that. I'm going to name that Symfonos 1. Click import. Just check the network settings real quick. So right click, settings, network. Okay, good. We have the host only adapter. That's what we want. Go ahead and start up the Symfonos 1 VM. Start up your Kali Linux box if you don't have it on already, and switch over to that once this is booted up. First thing we want to do is find the IP address of Symfonos 1. So open up your terminal, use netdiscover -i eth1 for the host only interface. Okay, got the IP address. Now let's run our nmap scan. We have a relatively big attack surface here. We have SSH over port 22, SMTP over port 25, HTTP over port 80, and Samba over ports 139 and 445. So what I want to do now is check out Apache web server first over port 80. I'm just going to minimize that, open up a web browser, and let's go. Still have that stuff from my last one. Let's go to this IP address of Symfonos 1. Okay, so we have a picture here. All right, I'm just going to do Control U. It's going to inspect the HTML and view its source. So I see nothing except for image source image.jpg. So that's what this is right here. I'm just going to save that, see if there's any metadata there that we can analyze. I'm going to save that to my downloads folder. Let's just minimize that. Go back to our terminal here. Just cleared out the screen. And we're going to go to the downloads folder. So the file that we just downloaded, it's index.jpg. Okay, so what I want to do here is run strings on this JPEG file. Okay, I see nothing here except for this string. So Wikipedia page that says Peter Paul Rubens, The Fall of the Phaeton. So it's some sort of artwork that may be some sort of clue, but so far no directly relevant findings. So let's clear that out. And I'm going to try to brute force some web directories with dir/b. So dir/b, http :// and the IP address of Symfonos 1. We have nothing so far except for a bunch of default Apache files. We're not getting anywhere with port 80, so let's just switch gears and move to Samba instead. So I'm just going to clear this out, and I'm going to use a tool called enum for Linux. So just type in enum for Linux and the IP address of Symfonos 1. Start here from the top. Okay, looks like we have the version of Samba here, 4.5.16. And we have enumerated some shares here. We have a share name Helios and Anonymous. Okay. So we can map out the anonymous share, but not the others. So looks like Helios is a user. That's relevant information. Okay, we have password policy that's potentially useful for a brute force attack. All right. I was trying to enumerate users here. So here it is, Helios, local user. All right, so the important information here is that we're able to access the anonymous share. I'm just going to clear that out for right now. And we're going to use SMB client to access that anonymous share. So we have SMB client // IP address of Symfonos 1 / anonymous. We should be able to get in there with no passwords. I'm just going to hit enter. All right, looks like we are in. And I have one file in here called attention.txt. So I'm just going to get that. So get attention.txt. Okay, we got it. Just going to exit out. And let's see what attention.txt has for us. Attention.txt has instructions here for users to stop using passwords like Epidioco, QWERTY, and baseball. So what I'm going to try to do is log on to the Helios user that we saw earlier in the enum for Linux output and try all three of these passwords. So SMB client, IP address of Symfonos 1, Helios, and a uppercase U switch to specify the Helios user. And we're going to try all these passwords here. So first we have Epidioco. Did not work. Now we're going to try the second one. Okay, so QWERTY is the correct password for the user Helios for this Samba share. Let's see what's in there. We have research.txt and todo.txt. So let's get both of those and see what they are. All right, just downloaded both of those files, exit out, and let's see what they have. So I'm just going to clear out first. Cat research.txt, cat todo.txt. Okay, the first one has something about Greek mythology. Could be useful, I'm not sure, but the second one has a set of, it's a to-do list. So binge watch Dexter, dance, and work on Helios in Leet speak. So we're going to just copy that because it looks like a web directory. I'm going to minimize that, and we're going back to web browser here. And IP address of Symfonos. And we have Helios right there. We just copied that. Okay, so we have a WordPress site here. And if I hover over these links, if you see at the bottom left corner, it's trying to resolve to Symfonos.local. Okay. So if you try to go to Symfonos.local, it's not a real, or you can't resolve to it because we're going to have to change our settings in Etsy hosts in order to access these various resources. So let's go ahead and do that now. Just minimize this real quick and go back. I'm going to open this terminal here. All right, so just VI Etsy hosts. And at the bottom here, we're going to add a line, IP address of Symfonos 1, specify Symfonos.local. We're going to save that. Now we should be able to access the Symfonos resources. So let's just reload this page. All right. As you see, it's all rendering properly now, and we should be able to access any of these Symfonos.local resources. Now let's run WP scan in order to enumerate potential vulnerabilities in WordPress, vulnerable plugins, and try to enumerate users. But before we do that, I need to tell you something. There's a new thing that we have to do with WP scan. They require us to have a API token in order to query the vulnerability database. Without this, it's essentially useless because the whole point is to be able to find vulnerabilities. So luckily, it's free. You can register for it, 50 API requests per day, which is pretty decent. I'd rather, if you're using this on a regular basis, it'd probably be best to just buy it. But anyway, register to that. If you want to skip this section and just check out my results, you can do that as well. So what we're going to do now is run WP scan. So as you see here, we have WP scan specifying the URL and the location of the WordPress installation. And we have the API token switch with my API token. Yours is going to be different, obviously, and mine's obfuscated so nobody eats up all my API requests. So we have the enumerate switch. We're going to enumerate plugins and users. So hit enter once you got all that. Okay, so see a bunch of vulnerabilities identified, a bunch of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities based on the version. So let's see, we have unauthenticated view of posts, cache poisoning. I saw up there open redirection. So these are all good for a real penetration test to explore as far as findings. But what we want to do is gain root access to this box. So what I see down here is a local file inclusion. Perhaps we can leverage that to get some information that'll push us further towards our goal. So let's check out SecList right now, see if there's a proof of concept that we can use. All right here, proof of concept. So we have the host, which needs to be our host. So I'm just going to copy from WP content onto the end. Looks like it's trying to gain access to the Etsy password file. So let's see if we can actually do that. I'm just going to paste that proof of concept right here in the URL. Okay, there we go. So we have Etsy password. Here's the results. Okay. Yeah, see? We have the user Helios here. Anyway, let's see if we can use this to somehow gain root access. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way to the right here to the Ajax underscore path parameter. And instead of Etsy password, I'm going to change it to /var/mail/Helios. Now I'm going to explain why I'm doing that, because I recall SMTP being open on port 25, and there's a well-known method of poisoning SMTP in conjunction with LFI to accomplish remote code execution. And that's what we ultimately want if we're going to get into the target system. So let's see if we can actually access this resource here, var mail Helios. Okay, we definitely can. So now we are going to connect manually to SMTP using Telnet. Just minimize that. We no longer need these results, so clear that out. And we can type in Telnet, IP address, and we're going to specify a port of 25. Now I'm going to send a malicious email and include some PHP code that we can hopefully utilize in a parameterized request in our LFI exploit. So let's give that a shot right now. I'm going to just type in mail from Jesse at Symfonos at .local domain. All right. Receipt 2. Helios at Symfonos.local domain. Sending it to Helios, so it should be in their mailbox, and we should be able to see it rendered when we request that resource like we just did with LFI. All right. So I'm going to put in data, and we have PHP system get cmd. All right, so that should create a parameter that will allow us to execute system commands. That's the goal here. We got that. Just dot, that's to send it. So it said okay, queued, so it should be sent. Now let's just quit out. And now let's make sure that that worked. All right, so back to Firefox, and we have the path var mail Helios, just like before. I'm going to include the parameter cmd equals ID. So what I'm trying to do with that is to utilize the PHP code that I just sent with SMTP to execute the ID command. All right. So at the very bottom here, there's the ID command, or the results from it at least. And now I'm just going to do ifconfig to further show you that it's working. Okay, maybe ifconfig doesn't work, but ID did work. Let's do who am I. Helios. Okay, so we're able to execute system commands. Now that we know we can achieve remote code execution, let's run netcat and set up a listener. So we're listening on port 443, and we will try to put in a reverse shell payload with Python and get a reverse shell back to netcat. So let's have that listening in the background. We're just going to go back to Firefox here. So instead of who am I, I'm going to paste a Python. Just remove that. We have this Python reverse shell payload. IP address has to be the IP address of your Kali Linux box with port 443. So just go ahead and enter that. And it should just spin and not really ever connect, but you do have a reverse shell that'll come back to netcat. So now we are in, as you can see here, we have our web shell. All right, let's see if we can use anything in sudo. All right, command not found. Let me see if we have to specify the full file path of it. All right. Looks like we cannot use sudo. All right, so no worries. Let's try to find any files that are owned by root. So this is a standard practice when enumerating system post exploitation. So I'll show you this find command here. We're just setting these parameters to search for files that are owned by root, and this dev null here is to suppress errors so you have a nice clean output. I see something called opt status check, which is not a default binary, so it stands out to me. So let's go ahead and see what that does. All right. So what does that do? It just receives a response from a web server. So what I'm going to do is run the strings command on status check to see if we can get any relevant information from it. Let's see here, go to the top. All right. Okay, I see a command here. So curl hyphen capital I, capital H, and local host. So that's the full command. It's chopped up into separate lines. So I can assume that that's what this command is doing because it's getting a response from the web server. So let me just run this command up here in my terminal, see if it gets the same results. Okay. So we have, oh, we can't clear. All right. Do what I just did before. So opt status check. And now I'm going to just copy or repeat the command that I saw in the strings command results. So here it is. We have curl capital I H and http :// localhost. Okay, same exact results. So now that I know that I can run that as root, I want to find a way to abuse this to create a scenario where we can get a root shell. I want to replace the curl binary with a malicious binary that is going to allow us to spawn a root shell. So let's just go to the temp directory, cd/tmp, and I'm going to create an executable that will spawn a shell for us and give us root permissions. So I'm going to just type in echo bin sh enclosed in double quotes, and I'm going to put that into a file named curl. And now I'm going to change the permissions. So chmod 755 curl, make it executable. And now we're going to change the default path to the TMP directory. All right, so this is going to make that executable opt status check think that curl is in this directory. So it's going to use this curl instead of the one by default. Now, export path equals /TMP $path. Okay, so now we should be able to launch status check and have it execute this curl executable to spawn a root shell. Let's try it out. So opt status check. All right. Okay, yes, it did work. If you see here, we're now logged in with root privileges. So let's just spawn a TTY shell. Don't need to, but why not? Now let's go to our root folder. There's our flag, so let's just cat our flag. All right, so we're done here. Now, just in case you're wondering how I'd cleared the screen, I did export term equals screen. After I did that, I was able to clear and do a couple other things. So anyway, we're done here. Let's move on to the next one. Symfonos 2 is the second intentionally vulnerable VM in the series. Just like the previous one, the objective is to gain root access and capture the flag file. Let's get to work. So first, let's import this file. Double-click the OVF. I'm going to name that Symfonos 2. Click Import. Once the import is complete, start it up and switch over to Kali Linux. Same as always, open up a terminal, netdiscover-i eth1. Let's find that IP address. Now that we have the IP, let's move on to port scanning and service enumeration. So nmap-a, same as always. We have FTP over port 21, SSH over port 22, HTTP over port 80, and Samba over ports 139 and 445. Being that we found some interesting data in Samba during the first Symfonos challenge, let's check that out first. So I'm just going to clear this out. Enum for Linux and the IP address of Symfonos 2. Okay, starting from the top. Got the version here of Samba. All right, I see that we have access to the anonymous share again. We're going to check that out. And we do not have any users enumerated here. All right. Just let that finish. Okay, actually, I do have two users here, Yolis and Cronus. So let's just document that. We have these two users, and we're able to connect to the anonymous share. I'm just going to clear that out for now. We have SMB client and the IP address Symfonos 2 /anonymous. No password needed, just hit enter. Okay, I see a file named backups. So actually, no, that's a directory. See that D here? So let's go into that directory. All right, so I see a file named log.txt. So let's grab that file. Just get log.txt and then exit out. Let's check it out. So cat log.txt. Oh, it's a little bit bigger than I expected. All right, I'm going to just pipe that to less. So actually less log.txt. Okay, starting from the top here. Okay, I see this file shadow.back. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, so the only useful information I found so far is that shadow.back file and the fact that we can anonymously log into FTP. We also see this running as the Eolus user. So let's just exit out of that. I'm going to try to FTP into Symfonos 2. So FTP in the IP. And just type in anonymous. And just hit enter. All right. So let's see if we can access any of the system files from here. So I'm just going to type site cpfr etc password. All right. So it says that etc password is accessible. Let me see if I can just download it directly. No, I can't. Okay, so let's instead copy it to the anonymous Samba share. So we have the username Eolus. So let's just run a quick FTP command. Site cp2 home Eolus share password. So we already ran the copy from command etc password. All right, copy successful. So while we're at it, let's try the shadow.back file. So I'm just going to do the same command here, copy from. If you remember, it was var backups shadow.back. Okay, directory file exists. Now we're going to do the same thing, copy to shadow.back. Give you a second to see what I did there. Okay, so what I just did is copy the etc password file and the var backups shadow.back file to my anonymous share. So let's go back to Samba and check out the results. Just connecting back to Symfonos 2, the anonymous share. Perfect. All right, those are our two passwords that we wanted. So I'm going to get password, get shadow.back. And now we'll exit out and check those files out real quick. So first one was password. So let's take a look at we have our users here, Eolus and Cronus that we saw earlier. Nothing new in here. Let's see shadow.back. Okay, great. So we have some password hashes here. We have the root password hash, Eolus and Cronus. So let's just grab this entire string here for Eolus. I'm going to copy that. Just exit out. And we're going to create a new file named Eolus. Just paste that string in there. Save it. All right, and we're now going to use John the Ripper to try to crack that hash. So John, specify the file Eolus, word list. We're going to use rocku.txt. There it is. All right, so we have a password here, Sergio Teamo. Let's grab that and try to SSH into Eolus. So just SSH Eolus at IP address of Symfonos 2. Yes, when prompted. And I'm going to try the password that we just recovered with John the Ripper. Very good. Now we're in. Just going to clear that out. All right, let's see what pseudo privileges we have. None. All right, so let's enumerate this box. Let's see if we can find anything interesting with this script I have, linux enum.sh. So I have it already installed here. Well, I downloaded it already in this Kali VM that I provided with the course. If you do not have my VM and you're using your own, just Google Linux enum and get it from GitHub. It's pretty simple. So here it is. I put it in my var www HTML directory. So I'm just going to use Apache 2, start that, and wget it from Symfonos. So let's just wget IP address of Kali Linux. If you're not sure what your IP address is, you can run the ifconfig command on your Kali Linux box. There it is under ETH1. That's your host-only interface. And the name of the file was linuxenum.sh. No, linenum.sh. Sorry about that. So let's just use the correct name of the file. There we go. So we've downloaded it to Symfonos. And now we are going to run linenum.sh. Start at the top here. Let it run. Just scrolling through until I find some potentially useful information. There's a lot of stuff to look through here. So when you're enumerating, that you have to sift through a lot of information till you find something that's useful potentially. Okay, here we go. I see something here. Port 8080. There's a service listening on that port. I did not see that in the nmap command results, so that is potentially useful. All right. I also see 3306. That's MySQL's default port. And see, I see port 25 as well. Let's keep moving. Just document that information. Okay. There's a binary permissions. You want to look at that. Okay, SUID files. You definitely want to look at that. Those are files that can be run as root. Nothing particularly interesting here. Okay. I see a password.back file that I cannot access because it's owned by root. I see the shadow.back file that we already have. All right. So we didn't see port 8080 in the nmap scan. Let's open up a browser to check if we can access this port. So I'm just going to minimize this and open up a web browser real quick. I'm going to type in that IP address for Symfonos 2 and specify port 8080. Unable to connect. So I guess it isn't public facing. We need to figure out a way to access that port. It's probably an internal service that's not accessible remotely. So what we can do is connect an SSH tunnel over port 8080 so that we can access the service over port 8080. So let's just cancel out of this. What we want to do is just exit out of this SSH. Type in SSH-L 8080 localhost 8080 YOLOS and the IP address of Symfonos 2. Just grab that password real quick. Okay, now let's try to access that port. All right, so we can't use this IP address anymore. We have to use the loopback address because we have that SSH tunnel. Okay, now we can access the service. Some Libri NMS login page. So let's just try the same credentials we have for SSH. So Yolis Sergio Te Amo. All right, good, we're in. So let's poke around real quick, see if there's anything we can use here to escalate privileges or do anything, see if we find any useful information or functionality here. Yeah, for this, I'd probably want to use Burp Suite. So yeah, first of all, I want to see if there's anything directly exploitable here based on Libri NMS, because I'm not familiar with it. So I'm just going to go over to Google and I'm going to search for any publicly known exploits for it. So a lot easier than looking around in here and trying to exploit it manually. First, I'll try the easy route. Okay, so let's just open up another tab and Google Libre NMS exploit. Okay, I see a couple here. We see some Metasploit exploit modules. Let's just click on this Rapid7. It'll give us the exact exploit module that we can use here. So let's try this one out. Looks promising. Yep. Command injection. That's what we want. So let's go over here to our terminal. Type in MSF console. We're going to start up Metasploit and try this exploit out. Okay, so I'm just going to paste what we just found there in Rapid7 using that command injection for Libre NMS. And I'm going to set our hosts to localhost because remember, we're still using that SSH tunnel over 8080, so that's going to connect to that service. So we're going to set the username. We have Yolis. Set the password to Sergio Te Amo. Set the lhost to ETH1. And this should, if successful, get us a shell. So let's just press run, see if it works. Okay, I see what I missed here. I actually did not set the R port. So let's just see real quick what the options are. As you can see here, the R port is set to 80 by default. So you got to pay very close attention to your configuration here. Otherwise, it will not work and you'll get what you just saw on my screen. So we're going to set the correct R port now and press run. All right, now it's working. So it looks like the exploit worked and we have a command shell opened. So let's list out these sessions that we have here. All right. So just going to interact with session 1. All right. So as you can see here, we have established a shell here under the user Cronus. Okay, let's give ourselves a TTY shell with this simple Python code here. And now let's see if we have any sudo privileges. So sudo -l. Okay, very good. We can run MySQL as root with no password required. So privilege escalation here is going to be very easy. All we have to do is use a well-known method to break out of restricted terminals. Knowing that we have sudo access to MySQL, this will elevate our privileges to root. So just type in sudo MySQL -e single quote, backslash, exclamation point. It's going to make a literal exclamation point, space, /bin, /sh, closing single quote. Very good. Here we are. We have root privileges now, and I will go to the root folder for our flag. Oops. There we go. So we have rooted Symfonos 2, and now we can move on to Symfonos 3. Symfonos 3 is the third in the Symfonos series. We're going to be working on enumeration and exploitation of this system with our goal to get root access and to capture the flag, similar to the others. Let's get started. So double-click the OVF file to import it. Going to name mine Symfonos 3. Click import. Once Symfonos 3 is imported, click Start, and we will switch over to our Kali Linux box once that has booted up. In your Kali Linux VM, open up a terminal. Type in netdiscover-ieth1. We're going to find the IP address of Symfonos 3. Okay, we found the IP address. Now let's run an nmap scan. Now that that's done, we see here that we have FTP over port 21, SSH over port 22, and HTTP over port 80. So let's check out port 80 over a web browser real quick. I'm just going to minimize that. Double-click the web browser here. IP address. Okay, we have some image file here. I'm just going to do Control-U on my keyboard here so I can view the source of this HTML. So I just see this image here, and can you bust the underworld in a comment? So let's see if we can go to a web directory named underworld. No. Okay. Next step, let's try dir-b to brute force some web directories if we can. So just dir-b IP address. Just run the default settings first. Okay, I see something here, gate. So it's a directory. Let's go there. All right. Looks like we have another image. Let's view the HTML for that. Nothing to see here. All right, so let's see if underworld is under gate. Nope. All right, so let's go back to our terminal, and this time, let's clear that out. We're going to try dir-b again, and we're going to search gate underworld and see if we can find anything under that directory, if anything exists. All right, nothing there. Okay, so far we've been unsuccessful. Let's go back to the web browser. I'm going to try one more thing. So I remember in the first dir-b output, there was CGI-bin, and let's just see if underworld exists there. Okay, great. So we have found something. Looks like some sort of app that displays statistics here. So with knowledge that it's in the CGI bin directory, this leads me to believe that it may be vulnerable to shell shock, which is something I've seen plenty of during the course of my exploiting these CTF boxes. So let's check to see if it's indeed vulnerable. Just hop back to our terminal here. And I'm going to paste a quick curl command as going to attempt to access the Etsy password file. Show it to you right here. So we're just going to send this curl, and we're going to inject a payload, a shell shock exploit, right here into the user agent HTTP header. So we're going to try to execute this command, bin bash cat etc password. So all we're trying to do is read the etc password file, and it will work if it is vulnerable. Very good. So we have successfully exploited shell shock. So it is vulnerable, and we have a couple of users here, Hades and Cerberus. So we can remember that for future. And now that we know that it is vulnerable to shell shock, let's set up a netcat listener and get ourselves a reverse shell. First thing we're going to want to do is ncnlvp. We're going to specify a port of 4446. So we're just setting up a netcat listener real quick. And I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-T to open up a new tab. Now, this other curl command that I'm going to run here, show it to you. Same thing. We're injecting an exploit into, well, this time into the referrer header. And what we're going to do here is run some bash command here, which is going to try to acquire a reverse shell. So what you're going to want to do here is change the IP address to your Kali Linux VM host-only IP address. And here's the target, which is Symfonos 3. So I just ran that. Very good. Okay, so we've got a reverse shell. Let me see if it worked properly. Yes, it did. So I'm now logged on as Cerberus. Now let's use Python to get a TTY shell. All right. Let's check for any sudo permissions. Okay, so we cannot use the sudo command at all. Now let's use TCP dump to passively sniff traffic to see if there's anything interesting going over the wire. So I'm just going to use TCP dump -nnttttai, and we're going to listen on the loopback address and see if there's anything interesting going back and forth on the network. Just sit here and wait for a little bit. After a little bit of waiting, we see that FTP traffic has initiated, and we have the plaintext user Hades and password right here. So let's just copy down those credentials, and we know that SSH is running on this target. So let's try to use this Hades and password to try to log into SSH. I'm just going to create a new tab here. So SSH Hades at IP address of Symfonos 3. Yes when prompted. And we're just going to copy this password that we got from the network traffic. Paste it right there. Very good. Now we're in as Hades. We have a legitimate SSH session. Now I want to ship over PSPY32 to help us enumerate the system a bit and hopefully get some privilege escalation going. So what is PSPY? It's a tool that allows us to analyze processes, and it uncovers commands run by other users, cron jobs, etc. as they are executed. So I have it downloaded for you. Let's just hop over to this local Kali terminal, and it's right here in the root folder. There it is. It's not there by default. I downloaded it, and if you're not using the Kali Linux VM that I provided in this course, you're going to have to go download it. So anyway, I'm just going to run SCP, name of the file, Hades user, IP address of Symfonos 3, and we're just going to drop it in the home folder of the user Hades. And just going to grab that password again. It's not on my clipboard. All right, sent it over. Now back to the SSH session, and it should be right here. Yes, it is. All right, so let's just run that PSPY32 executable and see if we can get any interesting information out of it. So it's just going to scan and give us a nice output here. Okay, so after letting PSPY32 monitor for a bit, I see that there's a process running periodically. This opt ftp client ftp client.py. So I want to go check that out. Let's just cancel this, Control C. And so I'm just going to cat that, see what's in it. All right, looks like a simple Python file here. Okay, that's how we got the username and password here, because it ran that over FTP. Plain text, we saw it right in the network traffic, so it periodically was sending that over the wire. Okay. So this is being activated periodically. Let me see what access we have to it. Oops. We're just going to run an ls command to see the permissions on this file. Okay. So it belongs to Hades, so we have write permissions to it. Let me see. So we can't run this FTP client.py file as root directly, but I'm betting that it's being run as root periodically. So what I want to do is modify this Python file to send a reverse shell back to Kali Linux. So I'm going to create a new netcat listener over here with a different port, NLVP 4447. Go back to the SSH session over here, and let's just modify this Python code here. Just going to hit DD, remove all these lines here. And what I'm going to do is paste in the one-liner from Pentest Monkey that we've been using for the reverse shells. It's formatted here in the correct syntax for this Python file. I'll show it to you right now. There it is. Pretty simple there. I'll just have the IP address of Kali Linux right there. You're going to have to change that to the correct one for you. So save that, and let's see how long it takes to get a reverse shell. Hopefully it's a root one. All right, so after a couple of minutes of waiting, I see right away that I have a root shell. There we go. So let's just go to the root directory. There's our flag there. So let's cat that flag. There we go. We have rooted Symfonos 3. Now let's move on to Symfonos 4. Now on to Symfonos 4, which is the fourth installment of the Symfonos series. As with the others, we'll be trying to get unauthorized root access to the system and capture a flag. Let's get to work. So double-click the OVA file to import it. Click Import. Once the import is complete, highlight Symfonos 4 and go to Start. Once Symfonos 4 is booted up, switch over to your Kali Linux box. Just go ahead and open up a terminal here. We'll type in netdiscover-ieth1. After your netdiscover scan is complete, let's just run a simple nmap scan. So nmap-a IP address of Symfonos 4. This time we only have SSH over port 22 and HTTP over port 80. So let's just open up a web browser and check the IP there. Minimize this real quick. Open up a web browser. Just http:// and the IP address of Symfonos 4. So it looks like Poseidon. We have just an image, nothing good in the HTML here. All right, so now we're going to have to try to brute force some web directories with dir. So Just minimize that for now. Back to our terminal. I'm going to just clear that out. And we will plug in the IP address of Symfonos 4. Okay, so we've only been able to find a bunch of default Apache files. Nothing helpful here. So let's try again a little bit differently this time. I'm just going to clear this out. And we are going to run Derby again. This time with the -x switch, which is going to append .php to each request. So let's just run that real quick, see if we get any different results here. Okay, that was very quickly. We found nothing. So let's pull out a bigger word list and try this again. So I'm just going to use big.text. It's a much larger word list. So we're going to try that, see if we can get anything from that. All right, now we are in business. We have 2 different files discovered here. I'm just going to open them up, right click, open link. Do that for c.php as well. Okay, looks like c.php redirects to Atlantis. So both the same resource essentially. All right, well, let me view the source real quick, see if I can find anything interesting. Nothing particularly interesting here. So I'm just going to close this other tab. All right, let's try just admin. Nothing good there. All right. Let's try some SQL injection. Okay, so not going to be that easy. Let's just set up our proxy real quick and use Burp Suite. So as you recall from the previous lecture, just go to Preferences here, type in Proxy, and click on the network settings. I have it set up here already. If you did not take the previous lecture or forgot, we just have to put in the loopback address here and port 8080, which is the default for Burp Suite, and use proxy server for all protocols. All right, so we can now open Burp Suite. All right, so if you notice here, I upgraded Burp Suite to 2020.2.1. It was 2020.1, but I wanted to make this VM that I give you as modern as possible at the time of this recording, so there you go. It might be different in a week, but we'll see when that happens. So we got temporary project. That's your only choice, and click Next. Use Burp defaults. Start Burp. Now let's switch over to the proxy tab. We have intercepting on. We want to keep it on. And I'm just going to type in admin test, and click login. We're going to intercept that request right here in the proxy. So now I'm going to right click, send to intruder. All right, so let me explain what I'm doing here. We're just going to be taking a bunch of SQL injection payloads to try to bypass authentication. So instead of typing each one or copy and pasting each one at a time, we're going to automate that with Burp Suite Intruder. So let's just go to the Positions tab. I'll show you how to do that. We're going to clear the automatically set positions, and I'm just going to set test and test as the payload positions. This is where we're going to send the exploit towards. This is going to be the payload position that we set. So attack type is going to be battering ram. And what that's going to do is it's going to send the payloads at both of these parameters at the same time, the username and the password parameter. So that's done. Let's go over to the payloads tab. And I have this, I'll show you real quick. I have this small list of SQL injection payloads that are good for bypassing authentication. So I'm just going to paste that. I have it on my clipboard now. This little list is included in a text file that's attached to this lecture. So just going to go ahead and click options, and we're going to set redirections to always. That's going to make it to where we follow redirections instead of just stopping at the subsequent response from the web server. So that's done. Go to the payloads tab and click start attack, and we're going to see if this works. Okay, let's take a look at these responses. We have two different lengths, 2058 and 878. That's the content length of the response from the web server. So we have the first response here. Let's just render it real quick so we can see it. Incorrect login. So that's obviously not a good response. We want to be able to bypass the authentication, and that is not it. So let's go to the 878 length ones, which also has a redirection that indicates it probably did work. So look at the response here. It redirected to c.php. And we have some sort of response here. Looks like a file parameter. So let's just use this request and see if we can bypass authentication. So all I'm going to do here is right click, request in browser in original session. Just click copy. And now I'm going to turn off the proxy, go back to the web browser, and just paste what we've just copied. So hit enter. All right. Very good. So we have bypassed authentication, and now we're in some page asking us to select a god, and we will see what that's about soon. But I want to show you how to do that manually if you didn't understand what we just did. So I'm just going to go back and show you one of these payloads that worked. So all we did here was type in admin. Well, it was admin, and then it was admin test, and then I set test as the payload position. So what happened was admin, and then one of these payloads. So a couple of them works. This is one of the one that worked. So we'll just paste that same exact string here in password, click login. Boom, we bypassed authentication. So that's how to do it manually. I'd also like to point out that I used SQL map to try to automate this whole process, and it was able to work, but I wasn't able to do anything with the data that was in the database. I got an admin hash that I was not able to crack, so it's a big dead end, and I didn't want to waste everybody's time by going through it, but I wanted to mention that SQL map does work, and you could have used that in a different capture the flag scenario, possibly. So anyway, let's go ahead and select a god, see what happens. We're going to just turn the proxy on so to take a look at the request. All right, so when you click select a god, it includes a file parameter, and this one is for Hades. We've clicked Hades. All right, so it just describes who Hades is. Just take a look at the page source. Okay, there's three choices here: Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. All right, that's unrelated there. So here you probably want to use LFI, local file inclusion, or directory traversal. So let's try using a bunch of directory traversal payloads and see if that works. So same thing as before. We're just going to turn the intercepting proxy on, select a god, click Hades. Now that you have that intercepted, right click and send to intruder. We're going to configure a different attack here. So real quick, what we're doing here is directory traversal, which is a technique that allows us to access restricted files by utilizing a payload such as .. in order to move outside of the web directory and access other directories. So I'll show you how that works. Now we have these payload positions. I'm going to clear that out, and we are going to put in .. and we're going to set a payload position. I'm just going to type in test here, highlight that text, click add, and that's going to be your payload position. So we have our directory traversal payload to the left here, and this is where each file is going to be inserted, or each file name. So now let's go over to the Payloads tab. So I have a relatively large file name word list that I'm going to use right here. It's attached as a text file in this lecture, so you can access that on Udemy. Anyway, I have it on my clipboard, and I'm just going to click paste. So that's going to be our payload. We have 1,539 words, so this is going to take quite a long time if you want to exhaust this entire word list. So if you want to, you can skip past this because it's going to take a couple hours at least. Otherwise, you can wait it out. But I expect that you at least configure the attack and have knowledge of the concept behind it before you move forward in this lecture. So let's just go over to options real quick. I like to have redirections set to always. That way you can see where the request ends up after a redirect instead of just the subsequent web response. So do that and go back to payloads and click start attack to get this started. And let's just wait till that finishes. All right, so after a little bit of waiting, I clicked this length button here to sort it by length, and I see that we have one file that's different length than all the others. So let's just click on that. You see this is a URL encoded request to var log auth. So looks like we have a response from that file. All right, so I'm just going to right click that like what we did before. Request in browser and original session. We're just going to go up here. Let me just turn intercepting off for the meantime. All right, so as you see here, we have access to this var log auth file. And it is logging SSH login attempts. Very good. All right, so we're going to do this manually. I'll just show you real quick. So just // // var log auth. There you go. Okay, so based on what I see here, we could potentially use this to execute code. We have a previous finding on nmap, SSH, running on our target. And we can poison SSH with a line of code instead of a user, which would be inserted into this file. And since we can render it here with this directory traversal exploit, we could be able to arbitrarily execute remote code. So let's give that a shot right now. Let's hop over to a terminal real quick. So let's take a look at this SSH command. Instead of a user, we have this line of PHP code. So what we're hoping is that this line of PHP code is interpreted as PHP when it's loaded into this web page right here. So I'm hoping that once this is logged into var log auth, we're able to have this CMD parameter, and we can use that to execute arbitrary code. So let's go ahead and send that out. Type in yes when prompted, and it's going to fail. So I'm just going to type in whatever as the password, doesn't matter. And I'm just going to do that one time and Control C to cancel, and just go back here, and we're going to see if that worked. Okay, so let's try to leverage that CMD parameter. So ampersand CMD equals cat etc password. So what that's going to do is try to execute the command cat etc password to show us the results of that file. Scroll down a bit. Okay, so we have successfully run cat against that file etc password, as you can see here. That's the result. So now we have confirmed that we can execute bash commands. So let's use this remote code execution exploit to get a reverse shell. We should know how to do that by now. Just hop over to a terminal. So nc-nlvp, and I'm just going to use a port of 1234. And we're going to utilize a reverse shell payload. Okay, so starting from cmd equals, we're going to paste our reverse shell payload. It's just going to be one of those Python payloads we've been using this whole time. There it is. I'll just show it to you real quick, because it's kind of hard to see it there. All right, there it is. Now, what you're going to want to do, obviously, is change this IP address here to your IP address for your Kali Linux VM for the host-only interface. All right, so now that we have that covered, just hit enter. There we go. Now we have our reverse shell. Just go ahead and spawn a TTY shell for that. All right, very good. Check out to see if we have any sudo privileges. No, we do not. So let's check out netstat to see running processes. So we have netstat antup. All right, so we do not have netstat on the system either. So, okay, so we do have ss. So this is an alternative to netstat that gives us the same results. This is a perfect example of why it's important to know multiple different commands in case one is unusable or does not or isn't there. So let's just type in ss-tulpn. All right. We got MySQL running on 3306. And here's the SSH, port 80. We already know about all that. But here's one that we did not see on Nmap, 8080. That may sound familiar from the past exercise we did. So this time we do not have SSH credentials to get an SSH tunnel to access that internal service. But fortunately for us, there's another way around this using SOCAT. Let me see if SOCAT exists here. Yes, it does. Okay, so what we can do here is use SOCAT to create an SSH tunnel. So let's do that now. I just pasted that SOCAT command here. We're going to set up a tunnel with port 9999. So after running this, we're going to try to access port 9999 over Kali Linux's web browser. Let's go ahead and move over here. So IP address of Symfonos 4 and port 9999. All right, so we've come to this web page. It says cookie set Poseidon. Just going to go to main page. All right, I'm going to go back to where we just were and check the page's source. Okay, nothing to see here. So it says cookie set Poseidon. So I want to proxy this request to see what they're talking about with the cookie. All right, so we have intercept on right here. Just going to request that. All right, I see a base64 encoded username. Just going to highlight that and copy it. And go over to our decoder. Paste that string, decode as base64. We have a username of Poseidon, but more interestingly is this Pi object call. So what this is a base64 JSON encoded pickle object, specifically a Python pickle module for serialization and deserialization of Python object structures. So why does all this matter? Because we're going to use it to potentially execute code and get a privileged shell in the process. So if you want to learn more about Python pickle objects and everything I just described, you can go to the link that I have attached to this lecture and read up on it. Otherwise, let's move forward and try to exploit this service. So we're going to go to proxy. I'm just going to right click this and send to repeater because we're going to modify that username parameter. All right, here it is. For now, let's go back to decoder. And I am going to remove this and add a Pi object call of my own. And we do not want to decode this. We want to encode it as base 64. So just click encode as base 64. There we go. This is going to be our payload. So what this is going to do is send a Pi object call in the correct syntax here. And I have a netcat command that's going to send a connection back to my Kali Linux IP address. So this IP address needs to represent your Kali Linux's host-only interface IP. And I'm going to use port 5555. So before we run that, we're going to have to set up another netcat listener. So I'm just going to do Control-Shift-T to open up another tab. We're going to type in nc-nlvp 5555. Same port as we have in our payload here. And I am not going to use the plain text because that will be rejected by the web application. We're going to use this base 64 encoded string. So we're going to just inject that right here into the username parameter. So clear out. There we go. So hopefully this will send a connection back to netcat, and we will see that right now. All right, I see from there that it did work. Let's just go ahead and get ourselves a TTY shell. All right, I see right away that we are running this as root. Very good. Let's go to the root directory. There's our flag. Perfect. Okay, we're done with Symfonos 4. Now let's move on to Symfonos 5, the last one in the series for this lectures. Symfonos 5 is the last in the Symfonos series at the time of this recording. The goal is the same: get root access and capture the flag. Let's get to work. So double-click your OVF file, naming it Symfonos 5, click Import. Let's just make sure that this has the correct network settings. So right-click Settings, go to Network, and I see that it's set to NAT. We do not want that. We want it set to host only. So switch that up and click OK. Start it up. Once that's done booting up, let's switch over to our Kali Linux box. Over to your Kali Linux box, open up a terminal. Same thing as before, netdiscover. We have our IP address, so let's move on to the nmap scan. This time we have SSH over port 22, HTTP over port 80, and LDAP over ports 389 and 636. So the first thing I want to check is port 80. Just minimize that, open up a web browser. All right, we have an image here. I'm just going to do Control U, check that out. Nothing interesting here, just the JPEG file. All right, so same thing as the other Symfonos boxes. What I want to do now is brute force some web directories. So back to our terminal here. I'm just going to clear that out. And we are going to use dir-b. Try to get some web directories if possible. Okay, so I have admin.php. Let's check that out. So I'm just going to right-click that, open link. Got to a login page. Okay, let's just try admin. All right, so see if we can get in there with a quick SQL injection, same as we did before. No, not that easy. All right. Well, let's just load up Burp Suite real quick and configure our proxy, see what we can do here. So, have our settings same as before. Just load up Burp Suite. Temp project, next, start burp. Go to your proxy tab. I'm just going to type in test. All right, here's our parameters here. So what I want to try first is SQL map. See if there are any SQL injection vulnerabilities. So I'm just going to put an asterisk here in both of these parameters for SQL map to go ahead and test them both. So I'm just going to right click there, copy to file. I'm going to name this SQLI1. I already named one that, but don't worry about that. So back to our terminal. We're going to use SQL map -R to read that file that we just created, SQLI1. And we're just going to use a level of 5 and a risk of 3. That's the highest it goes. And we're going to use the batch switch, which is going to say yes to every prompt. Just let that run. Okay, nothing good here. So let's clear out of that. SQL map is unsuccessful. I have to assume there's no SQL injection vulnerabilities at this point. So let's try dirb again, this time modifying it a little bit. So I'm going to use a better word list here. All right, and now we're using -x.php to append .php to each request. So let's see if we get anything out of that. Okay, we have a couple of results here. We got home.php and portraits.php. So I just intercepted both those because proxy interception is still on. Just forward that request. All right, so let's just take a look at them in this proxy real quick. We have home.php. All right. So we have 3 pictures here. All right. Looks like home.php redirected to admin.php. Let me just try to go to home.php again with the proxy on. Okay. Interesting. Let's take a look here. I'm just going to intercept that request to home.php, send it to the repeater. Okay. So I just want to analyze this redirection real quick. All right. So I see here in the HTML, there's a parameter URL. So I want to see if there's anything that we can do with that. All right, so I'm just going to include that in our request. So URL equals, and let's see if I can access any Linux files. Let's see, we have this well-known Etsy password file. Okay, great. So Looks like we can abuse this URL parameter to read files within the file system. Now that we know that it's possible to leverage this LFI vulnerability to show Etsy password in the response before the redirect, I'm going to go ahead and try admin.php because we know that file exists. Okay, that did not work. Perhaps we need to specify the full file path. Generally, it is under var www HTML. So let's try that. Okay, there we go. We have the contents of admin.php down here. All right, so let's take a look at it. All right, we have this LDAP connect here. All right, so I see some useful information right here. This bind variable. All right, so what I see here is a hard-coded password in the LDAP configuration, as well as the domain controller information. So this is going to be useful for further attack against LDAP. Let's see what we can get out of this. Let's hop over here to a terminal, and we are going to use LDAP search, which is built into Kali Linux. All right, so I just pulled the information right out of that admin.php file that we found. So here's the password. There's the rest of the information. Port 389, port for LDAP, and the host, which is the Symfonos 5 IP address. Let's just send that query and see what happens. Okay, so I see the LDAP administrator's password here, and I also see a username, Zeus. And I see a user password that is apparently encoded in base 64. Let's just grab that string, go to Burp Suite Decoder, click Decode as base 64. All right. So I'm just going to copy that string there. And now we have a user and a password. We know that SSH is running on Symfonos 5. So let's go ahead and try to use these credentials to try to log in SSH with them. So back to our terminal. SSH Zeus at IP address of Symfonos. Yes, when prompted. Pasted that IP address. Boom, we're in. Type in sudo-l. We're going to see our sudo privileges. We have dpkg that we can run as root with sudo. That's very good. We can use this to escalate privileges. So we can use fpm to compile files of our own creation. This is going to be perfect for this use case. Let's go ahead and give that a shot. We're going to have to do that on our Kali machine. If you're not using the Kali VM I provided with this course, you're going to have to download and install fpm, which is simple. Just look it up online. So that being said, Control-Shift-T, go into a new tab, and we are going to create a very simple shell script that is going to spawn a bin bash shell. So if we can get this executed as root, this is going to escalate our privileges from the Zeus user to root. So let's try that real quick. First, we're just going to use V to create a shell script called privesc.sh, and all we're going to put in that file is /bin/bash. And we're going to save and quit that. Okay, and now we are going to use fpm. Let's take a quick look at this fpm command. We are just making a file named privesc, and we're using this shell script as our input file, and we're going to dump the output right here in the working directory. So just press enter with that. and I will show you the results in a moment. After a bit of waiting, we have our malicious.deb file. So let's bring that over to our target. We're going to use SCP for that. So SCP and name of the .deb file, Zeus at IP address of Symfonos 4. And we're just going to drop it in the home Zeus directory. And we need our password for Zeus. Just copied that over. All right, there we go. We're uploading the file. It's a little bit big. So just give it a second to finish. And once that's done, hop back over to our SSH session. All right, now we're going to use our sudo privileges, sudo, and I'm just going to paste that right there. And we're going to specify the malicious.deb file that we just created. Boom, now we're logged in as root. Pretty simple. That was a little bit quicker than the others. Just go and grab the flag. Very good. We're all done here. Symfonos 1 through 5 was pretty good. I liked them a lot. Lots of vulnerabilities to explore, and I had fun exploiting them. Let's move on to the next challenge. Joy is another intentionally vulnerable Linux VM that we're going to hack in order to get root access. It's a part of the digitalworld.local series that we're going to conquer. So double-click the OVF file. I'm just going to name it digitalworld.local joy. Now click import. Once that's done importing, just right-click, click on settings, and make sure that we have the appropriate settings for the network configuration here. We do not. We want this NAT to be host only. It's fine. Click OK. Click Start. And once that is booted up, go to your Kali Linux VM. First step, as always, find the IP address. So open up your terminal. netdiscover-i eth1. Okay, we have the IP address. On to the port scan and service enumeration with Nmap. So Control-C. Nmap-A, IP address. As you can see, we have a big attack surface here. We have FTP over port 21, SSH over port 22, SMTP over port 25, and HTTP over port 80, to name a few. So, let's see here. The first thing I want to check is FTP. It has anonymous FTP login allowed, as the script scan has uncovered for us. So let's check that out first. Just going to create a new tab here. And we will go to that IP address over FTP. We can get anonymous login. So just anonymous and click enter. There we go. Let's check out what's in here. First, let's check out the download directory. We got nothing in there. I'm just going to go back one directory and we will check out the upload directory. Okay, so we have a bunch of files here. Project underscore. Looks like potential usernames here. And we have a file named directory. So we also have one named reminder. I will go ahead and get the directory file. Check that out. Just download it, get directory. Now I'm going to exit out of this and check it out on our local file system to see what's in it. All right, so what we have here is a text file that shows a directory listing for a user named Patrick. Or, yeah, Patrick's directory. That's exactly what it is. So, say information of this machine. It's telling us what, yeah, Linux Joy, version of Debian, and it's probably Patrick's home folder, I would imagine. So, a bunch of files here. The one, haha, looks like maybe a hash here. Text files. I see a file named version control. That could be useful. Tell us the versions of software that's being used on the operating system. So this could be in his home folder, like I said. Let's try to grab that using the technique we used in our previous lecture. Try to get that over Telnet. So show you how to do that right now. Let's clear this out real quick. Telnet, IP address of Joy, and port 21. Okay, we're connected, so I'm going to type in site CPFR, and we're going to try the home directory of Patrick. So /home/Patrick /version control. That's the file that we just saw in that text file that we got out of FTP. So, all right. Says that the file is there, so we're going to copy it to the FTP location. So site cpto /home /FTP /upload /version control. Okay, the copy has been successful. Let's go back to FTP and try to grab that file. Same thing as before, anonymous login. All right. So here it is, the upload file that we put it in. So cd upload. There we go. There's the version control file that we just copied to this directory. So let's get that. Okay, quitting out of FTP. And I'm going to concatenate that version control file that we just downloaded. All right. Version control of external facing services. So we have Apache, Dropbear SSH, ProFTPD, and Samba. It shows us the versions of each one of those. All right. We should switch to OpenSSH and upgrade to ProFTPD. Note that we have some other configurations of the machine. So they changed the web root to this here. That's something we should definitely know for further exploitation later. All right, trying to perform some simple bash scripting. All right. Based on the information that was provided to us, they want to upgrade to ProFTPD, so there must be something wrong with this version. So I'm going to just copy that, and I'm going to go over to Google and see if there are any publicly known exploits for that version of FTP. So just open up a web browser. I'm just going to paste that right in there and type in exploit. So ProFTPD version exploit. And I see that there are several that are publicly known. Here's the one that we just used, the file copy exploit. I'll show it to you real quick. See exactly what we just did to get the directory file and the directory file was already there. Then we got the version control file using that exploit. So see a remote command execution exploit. That's what we want. We want to be able to access the system. So Here we go. We got this exploit.py standalone exploit. Let's get that. And yeah, I'll just going to clone it real quick. So git clone, and then the URL that's provided right here. Now go to that directory that was just created. I have that exploit.py file. So just type in python exploit.py, see what kind of syntax they want. All right, so they want the host, which is the IP address, the port, which is port 21, and the path, which they've supplied to us right here in the version control file. So we have everything we need for this exploit. Just going to type in python exploit.py again, and the host, which is the IP address. Oops. Specify that switch there. Host. And then we have the port of 21 and the path, which is right here. Okay. Very quickly, they say it has been exploited, and we can get our backdoor right here, which should give us a web shell. Let's check that out real quick. I'm just going to right-click that, open link. All right. So we need to supply a parameter here in the URL to execute commands. We can get that information by looking at the Python code. I'm just going to go back to the terminal and look at that exploit.py file. I see right away that it is using the CMD parameter, and that's how they verified it was working, by executing the whoami command and seeing if it worked. So let's go back up to the web browser, and I'll just type in $CMD equals ID, and that's how we're going to see if it works manually. Yes, it does. We have the results of the ID command right here. As you may have guessed, we now need to use a reverse shell payload so we can get an interactive shell going. So I'm just going to open up a new tab, type in nc-nlvp, use port 443. Now that we have that going, I'm just going to open up another tab and show you the reverse shell payload that we're going to be using. So here it is. And you're going to have to use the correct IP address for your Kali Linux local IP interface. So we got ifconfig here. That's how you find it. Here it is. Should be under eth1 if you're using the VM supplied with the course. I'll just replace that. And we're going to copy that payload here and paste it right here after CMD equals. And that should give us our shell. Let's go back to our netcat shell. There it is. Perfect. All right, so let's just see what we have in here. We have our backdoor.php file that we created, and I see OSCP. We already knew about that from looking at the directory information we fought from the file that we downloaded. So, all right, I see some potentially interesting stuff here. I see one thing that sticks out, Patrick Secrets of Joy. So let's check that out. Oh, okay. So credentials for Joy, Patrick, Apollo, and some numbers. And then we have root. How the heck do I know what the root password is? All right. So just record those and see what works. Let's log in as Patrick real quick. So I'm just going to type in Sue Patrick. Okay, so we do not have the correct terminal access. So let's just use this Python one-liner here, spawn a TTY shell. Hopefully now it'll work. So Sue Patrick. All right, here we go. I'm just going to copy this password here. All right, so that worked. See, okay, never mind. Let's try sudo-l. We have sudo privileges on this home Patrick script test file. So let's just type in sudo and specify that file path. See what we get. Okay, so it supposedly changed permissions of this test file to 777. Let me see if that's the case. Just take a look. I can view this. All right, permission denied. Anyway, so we know that this is a location where we have sudo access. And if you recall, with a raw telnet connection to port 21, we can upload files and copy them to whatever location we like. So we can copy a malicious script to this location and potentially elevate our privileges to root. So let's try that out real quick. I'm just going to create another terminal here, another tab. I'm just going to make a file named test. Very simple 2-line shell script here. Just trying to spawn a bin bash so we can get a root shell going. All right, so next is we're just going to FTP into Joy, anonymous login, and we are going to put the file all right, there it is. Actually, we should put it in the upload directory. So cd upload, put test. All right, there it is. Now let's go ahead and copy that file into the location where we have sudo access, like I said earlier. So I'm just going to quit out of FTP, and we're going to use that raw telnet connection to the IP of Joy over port 21. Site CPFR, home FTP, upload test. That's the file that we just created, the bash script. And we have the copy command. Good. Ready for destination. So copy to home Patrick script test. That's the place where we can sudo copy successful. So let's quit out of that and go back to our other tab here. So as soon as we execute this simple shell script, we should get root privileges. Let's check that out. So sudo, and there's the location. Very good. So as soon as we ran it, here it is, root at Joy. So let's just go to our root directory. All right, well, there's our flag. We win, and we can move on to the next challenge. Torment is another in the digitalworld.local series. It's an intentionally vulnerable Linux machine. We're going to be enumerating and exploiting this VM. Double-click the OVF file, and I'm just going to be naming this digitalworld.local torment. Click import. Now just make sure that the network settings are correct. So just right-click, click settings, go to the network tab, and it is not correct. So we want to change that to host only. Click OK, and click start. Once that's done booting up, we can move over to our Kali Linux box. Same as all the others, we're going to find the IP address with netdiscover. So terminal netdiscover -i eth1. Wait till that runs. While I'm waiting for this command to run, I noticed right away when I booted up the machine that there's two users here. We have QUI and Patrick. So let's remember that and move on to enumeration once we get the IP addresses. Looks like it should be finishing up soon. Now that we have the IP address, let's do our nmap scan. Same as before. There's a large attack surface here. We have port 21 running FTP, and I see that it allows anonymous login, and it just gave us a listing of the directory. We have port 22 running SSH. We have port 80 running HTTP. 445 running Samba. 667 running IRC. This could all be interesting. But I see right away that we have access to FTP, so let's go that route. I'm just going to create another tab here. Just FTP into that IP address. Anonymous, hit enter. All right. So I see shadow.back. So that could be the backup of Etsy Shadow, which would have some password hashes. So let's try to get that. All right, failed to open file. Consider using passive. So I'm just going to switch to passive by typing passive. Try that again. Failed to open file. Okay, we probably don't have permissions to open that file. But I do see .ssh up there. So let's go to .ssh, because right now I'm interested in something that'll let me gain access to at this point. And SSH is the way to do that if we can get like a private key or something like that. So let's take a look. All right, I see a private key there. So I'm going to try to get that. Get ID _RSA. Good, we got that private key. Let's quit for now and see if we can use that. First, we need to change the permissions of this private key. So chmod 600 and ID _RSA. There we go. Let's try to SSH as Patrick. So SSH Patrick at and the IP address of Torment. Yes when prompted. Okay. Just seeing if we could get in with password, and no, we cannot. So -i ID _RSA. We're going to try to use the private key to log in as Patrick. All right, so we need to enter a passphrase in conjunction with the private key. We do not know what the passphrase is. I'm just going to type in Patrick. Nope. Don't know it yet. Let's just try to enumerate further into FTP, see if we can get anything else that'll give us some clues as to what the password would be. Log back into FTP. Do an anonymous login, so anonymous, hit enter. All right. ls-lah. We're going to look at everything that's even hidden. All right, so I want to look at the IRC directory. All right, so I see a file named channels. I want to see what that's about. Just, okay. Good, we got it. So I'm just going to quit and take a look at that file that we just downloaded. What we have here is a file that contains a list of 2 channels for IRC. We also know that IRC is running on port 6667. So let's download, install, and load up HexChat, which is an IRC client, and try to access it. you're using the Kali Linux VM that comes with the course, you will not need to do this because it'll already be installed. So apt-get update and then apt-get install hexchat. Just going to type in hexchat. All right. Now we're going to click add. I'm going to name it Torment. And we're going to now click edit and change this new server into the IP address of Torment. Click off of it so it commits. Click close. And we are now going to click connect. All right. Access denied, bad password. So we're going to need to know the password for this IRC server. We know the specific service that's running is NG-IRC-D, which is Next Generation IRC Daemon. So let's just go to Google and see if there are any publicly known default passwords for this service. So open up your web browser. And I'm just going to type in Next Generation IRC Daemon default password. Okay, I don't like this. I'm just going to go back here and change my search to NGRCD password. Okay, here we go. We got a password here. Well, I can see it right here. We all like Debian. Some reason it wasn't letting us in there. All right, so just going to copy that. Go back here to hexchat. We're going to try to configure it with a password this time. So edit, and I'm just going to paste that password. We all like Debian. And click close. Just make sure, yeah, it's still there. All right, now let's try to click connect again. All right. So we successfully connected. As we know from our previous enumeration, we have two channels, games and tormented printer. I'm just going to, let's see, open the channels list. That's interesting. Well, I'm just going to go back to join a channel, and we're going to try to join games. Okay. Nothing really interesting here. Just go back here to join a channel. Tormented printer. Okay, take a look at this text here. All right, so in the topic, it gives us a password. And it looks like the password to their printer. Let's just copy that and check that out. I went back to the nmet output so I could show you real quick the printer, which is running on 631. It's running CUPS, which is Common Unix Printing System. So let's load up a web browser and try to hit the printer service over port 631. All right, just open that web browser up. HTTP, and the IP address of Torment with port 631. There we go. Here's the default documentation. We don't want to see that. I see administration. We have a configuration file here. Take a look at that. Nothing particularly interesting there. Manage printers. All right. So I see under the queue name area, we have a bunch of names. And I recognize Patrick and this name here. So this could be useful for us if we need to brute force some users. Let's remember those usernames. So copy those down. I'm just going to copy all this real quick. Just going to make a new tab here. I'm just going to make a file named usernames. Copy all that in there. Now I'm just going to use some basic awk and sed commands to remove the unwanted text. So you got cat usernames, pipe it to awk, print the first column here, pipe that to sed. We're going to remove the following text to give us a nice, neat output. See that? So I'm just going to redirect that to a new file, usernames 2. There we go. We can use that for later. All right, so I know SMTP is running, so I'm going to try to leverage this word list to try to enumerate legitimate users in SMTP. For this, a handy Metasploit auxiliary module can be used. I'm just going to type in MSF console. We're going to type in use auxiliary /scanner /SMTP /SMTP _enum. I'm going to set the R hosts to the IP address of Torment. Set the user _file to the usernames2 file that we used or that we created earlier. Now run that. All right, so what we've enumerated is the 2 users that we already knew about from the login page. Nothing new gained here, but at least it shows how to enumerate SMTP for the future. So let's just go ahead and exit out of Metasploit for now, and we are going to try to SSH into Patrick using that password that we found in IRC earlier to see if it will work in conjunction with our private key. So just go ahead and copy that password. Here it is, that long password there. And I'm going to SSH into Patrick, IP address of Torment, and the ID _RSA private key file. So I'm just pasting that long password in there. Very good, we're in. All right, let's see if we have any sudo permissions. See a couple here. We have power off, halt, reboot, systemctl. All right, let's keep those in mind. Try to enumerate some configuration files. Let me see. So there's a find command. I'm just going to start in the etc directory with the max depth of 1, searching for files with the .conf extension. So right here, 2 standard error. It's going to be redirected to dev null, which is null device, so we don't see the errors for a nice clean output. All right, so pretty exhaustive list. There's a bunch, so I want to narrow it down to world writable files. For that, I can use the perm command. Just going to change the max depth to 2. And the perm command of 2 is going to only show the world writable files. That means that we can write to them, basically. All right, so what we can do with this apache2.conf file is modify it to be executed with the permissions of a particular user. So assuming that this service starts at boot up, we can force this execution with reboot, which we have sudo access to with our current user, Patrick, as demonstrated earlier. Also, we're going to want to set up a PHP reverse shell in order to acquire access with these new privileges. Note that I tried this with the root user behind the scenes and it resulted in Apache not working on Torment. So we're just going to open up the file in a text editor. I'm using V, and I'm going to go down to vars. Just press N to go to the next one. This is where we want to be. So in this line, all we have to do is type in user space QIU group space QIU. And I'm just going to save that. All right, let's just switch over to another tab to go to our local Kali box. And what I'm going to do here is copy a PHP reverse shell that's built into Kali over to our web root. All right, and we're going to want to change a couple of the lines here because we need to specify our IP address. So my Kali IP address is under ETH1. Yours should be as well. I'm just going to copy that real quick. And I'm going to open up that revshell.php file. Go down a little bit. And here is where we need to change the IP variable. I'm just going to change that to the correct IP address for my Kali Linux VM. And I'm going to change the port. We don't have to, but I'm just going to do it anyway, to 4448. Save that. Now I'm just going to change over to the var www HTML folder. This is where we put our revshell.php file. And I'm going to set up a simple HTTP server. So python-m simple HTTP server. That's the module we're using. I'm just going to use port 9999. Show you a different way to serve up a file. So we're going to serve it up to Torment. Go over to the tab where we have our SSH session to Torment. And I'm going to change to the var www HTML file in Torment. And then wget, specify that IP address of Kali Linux, port 9999, and revshell.php. There we go. Now we have that file here. Now let's hop back over to this tab. We can kill our simple HTTP server. And I'm going to start netcat, so nc-nlvp. We had port 4448 specified in the reverse shell payload, so we're going to do that. And now we're going to go back to Torment, and we're going to reboot. So sudo-bin systemctl reboot. We're going to be kicked out of our SSH session, of course, so we got to wait a little bit. Wait till it reboots and try to initiate that reverse shell that we put in the web root of Torment. The reboot has taken place. I have a web browser open and I have this tab here with netcat running. So all we have to do is access Torment over a web browser and specify the name of the file, revshell.php. There we go. So we have access to that user, QIU. Now let's see if we have any sudo permissions on that. Okay, we have sudo permissions to Python. That's going to be really easy. So I'm going to show you how we're going to go ahead and elevate our privileges to root. A lot of you may have already figured this out, but all we're going to have to do is run our common Python code that we usually use for TTY shell upgrades with sudo in front of it. That should give us a root shell right off the bat. There we go. All right. There's our flag. Excellent. We're all done here. On to the next one.